All right. I think I'm live. Let me check. Sorry for being late, guys. I actually was filming for this channel and I did get a little bit distracted because I was like, oh, I want to be a little bit nice for you guys. Just do a little bit of a beat. Not too much. I just put on the lashes and the lipstick and did my eyebrows, but not a full beat here for you guys. So hopefully I'm checking the setup to see if it sounds good, if it looks nice. All right, it is on the side of the screen. That is good. That's good. Let me see if I can angle this right. Fix this. Because I want to be in the middle of the frame. Maybe I can fix the camera. There we go. All right. Perfect. So I'm going to get started. And hopefully you like my new setup here. I'm trying something new because I was like, there's a lot of topics here. Don't worry, the timestamps will be in the description bar after the video, but I wanted to have this as we go through this long commentary when it comes to Rahu transiting Shatabhisha. I tried to switch it up a little bit, new year, new vibe, gotta level up somewhat. So hopefully I can continue to grow. Now, I don't want to waste any more time. Let me get started, guys. So this is the Rahu and Shatabhisha video. Sorry for any pronunciation issues. I do try my best. And actually, let me do a little welcome thing. I'll say welcome astronauts. So I can have a pinned comment there. Make sure that you guys, what is going on? All right, there we go. I really got to get used to this studio. Pinned comment. Welcome astronauts to the Rahu and Shatabhisha video. I have been wanting to do this video a while, but obviously I couldn't. I was in grad school when Rahu first entered Shatabhisha in November 23rd, 2025. So now I finally have some time and we can get started on this video. As always, I have a script and this is Astro-Tarot research. So obviously I did my research, not to the level I wanted to do, but sometimes you just got to release it. Sometimes you just got to say, all right, you know what? It may not be perfect, but I've done my best with my research here. And so let us just get started. So Rahu enters Shatabhisha Nakshatra November 23rd, 2025, and it will leave Shatabhisha Nakshatra on August 2nd, 2026. So for most of the year, Rahu actually will be in the sign of Aquarius before moving into Capricorn. So it goes into Dhanishta and then it goes into Capricorn on November 26, 2026. So it's like in Dhanishta and Shatabhisha for the most part of this year. Rahu is known for its obsessive, ambitious, and material world-oriented nature. Also, along with its connection to new karma. And Shatabhisha is Rahu's highest ruled nakshatra. So it is top priority for Rahu. It's at its top element. It's like I've leveled up all the way. And so I was actually watching this clip from, Jyoti Vatsu. That's spelled Jyotirvatsu. So Jyotir Vatsu. And they explain that Rahu reaches its triple dignity on January 25th, 2026. So what that means is it's in its own sign, it's in its own nakshatra, and it's in its own sign in the Navamsha, which doesn't happen too often, right? So this configuration has been associated with major technological turning points, such as in 1998 with the birth of the internet. Granted, the internet was around before then, but you know, it was really picking up speed then. 2007, we had the release of the iPhone. And, you know, 2026, there's potentially, you know, making new waves when it comes to artificial intelligence. You know, I've heard some stories about companies already starting to be more autonomous. So far, people have kind of talked the talk, but they haven't walked the walk. And 2026 is bound to be the year that they walk the walk when it comes to AI. No more chatbots. We're moving to the next level. So the last time Rahu was in Shatabhisha was April 18th, April 18, 2007 to December 26, 2007. Before that, Rahu was in Shatabhisha September 11th, 1988 to May 20th, 1989. So I thought it was important that we go over those previous dates so we can get a feel for it. And I wanted to use this example to sort of like introduce the feel of what Rahu might bring in Shatabhisha. So in 2007, President Bush signed the Energy Independence Security Act, which aimed to reduce reliance on foreign oil by promoting like cleaner energy, improving efficiency through energy efficient buildings, expanding renewable fuel requirements, and raising fuel economy standards. So under this law, passenger car vehicles and light trucks were required to reach an average of 35 miles per gallon by 2020. Up from about 25 miles per gallon for passenger cars and about 20 miles per gallon for light trucks. That's what it was previously. That was the standard, the previous standard. So they wanted to get to 35 miles per gallon. They were at 25 and 20. As of 2025, those targets were not met, largely because of later administration, weakened enforcement, while consumer demands also shifted towards less fuel efficient SUVs and trucks, keeping fleet averages below the original goal. So what Rahu represents is having big vision, large scale goals and ambitions. During this time, we may be planting bold ideas for the future. But Rahu also has this illusionary side where it can overestimate or overscale what's actually sustainable and what can actually be enforced within reality once, you know, things actually start getting inputted into the real world. So what sounds like a very powerful visionary thing on paper may actually struggle to hold up when it comes to real world behavior. We run into limitations when we talk about Rahu as they appear. And then the upside, though, is though Rahu is this very grandiose figure and it has these big visions and ideas that may not always land perfectly, it also moves us forward in the ways that wouldn't happen without aiming big. So that is the essence of Rahu. Now let's get into love and dating 2007. So I had to narrow it down. I can't give you guys all of history for two different years. It's just like, I was like, oh no, we got to narrow it down to the things that people care about. And I know you guys care about your love and your money. So we're going to get into this. So love and dating in 2007. By 2007, online dating was clearly on the rise, and approximately 30 million Americans having visited a dating website in the previous year. Though it was still carried out, how do I say this? It still carried a noticeable stigma to it. I was going through older news articles and reels and things like that to get the information to see the sentiment in 2007. Though I was alive then, I was not using online dating. So generally, there was that stigma still attached to it. Online dating was perceived as something people turned to because they lacked friends or they didn't want to go out or they just didn't have a life in general. So even as news reports featured married couples who had successfully met through online dating, there was still that pause where people I don't know if that's for me. Okay. So Meeting people at bars still remain like the social norm, or through friends or family, but many singles cited like a lack of time being one of the major reasons for turning to online dating in the first place. So popular platforms at the time included Match.com, eHarmony, and SugarDaddy.com. You know, the girlies always need a sugar daddy. And many dating sites sponsored in-person events, speed dating, with women particularly being the primary participants for speed dating. And I think that kind of holds a little bit true today. So struggles around love and relationships in 2007 mirrored many issues we still see today. You know, according to Ebony magazine back in 2007, I've been telling you, I was going through the articles in magazines and stuff. Some Christian women would like write in saying that it was hard to find a man who was willing to wait till marriage. You know, other women wrote about marriages that appeared very lovely from the outside looking in, but ultimately the relationship lacked emotional intimacy, highlighting a lot of emotional disconnect within committed relationships. Marriage patterns in 2007 reflected both symbolic enthusiasm as well as decline. So what I mean by that is actually this year saw a notable spike in marriages just because of the date July 7th, on the 7th, 2007. So you had a lot of couples rushing to move and get married on this date because it was perceived as lucky, leading to thousands of people being married on that day. However, despite this temporary boost when it comes to marriage, overall marriage remained to be on the decline, with many couples choosing to cohabitate without marrying. Many people were, delaying marriage, particularly among college-educated individuals who felt like marriage was better suited for later in life, which makes sense. They got their career and things to worry about. So family structures were shifting, and we had about 40% of the children in the United States at this time, they were born into unmarried parents, representing a 25 increase in that from the previous 5 years earlier. So it's interesting that we see this major spike when it comes to non-traditional family structures. When we have this Rahu going into Shatabhisha, we have this Rahu in Aquarius. It's like we're changing the mode, we're changing the vibe. I mean, comparing to 5 years earlier, a 25% increase in unmarried couples who are just kind of like having kids together is interesting. It's interesting that we see that pull away from tradition. Now in 1988 and in 1989, when it came to love and dating, when Rahu was going through Shatabhisha this time. So in the late 80s, the dating scene also sort of mirrored some trends that we see here today, where there's both negative and positive experience. And, people talk about their good dates and bad dates. And now they do it on social media, TikTok, and a lot more. But, back then you probably do it in person with your friends and maybe on some game show or something like that. But I'll say this, people often prefer to meet through friends as well as their social networks. And the reason for this is because this was coming off of the AIDS epidemic. And so people felt a lot more, a stronger sense of security when it came to filtering people through their friends and family, just because there may be more known about their dating history or even their sexual history if you met through friends and family. Now, personal ads in newspapers were still a thing, okay? So you have many people presenting themselves, putting themselves out there, trying to meet in that manner. So historically in that period, research found that men tend to prefer and this is like research looking into preferences when it came to dating and love through specifically personal ads. So that's what the background I wanted to give, where I'm getting this information from. So essentially, what we had here when we're talking about their people's preferences, men and women tend to, I'll say men prefer to date 2 to 3 years younger when they were younger, and women tend to date 2 to 3 years older when they were younger. Now, as men age, the study suggested that there was an increase in preferences for larger age gaps, with obviously older men preferring, significantly younger women. Age preference was actually considered the strongest variable when it came to choosing a mate. And I think that's kind of a little bit true today. You see a lot older men trying to date younger. You see most women preferring that 2 to 3 years age gap. So it's interesting that these personal ads were still reflective of today's norms in society. And I was going to say, in modern dating, though preferences that were stated in the past persisted, the actual age gap between partners has generally narrowed. Do you know what I mean? So what I mean by that is you have these people who make these preferences when it comes to age gaps and et cetera, things like that, like men saying older men saying they want to date significantly younger women. That actually doesn't play out, generally in the real world. Actually, over time, the age gaps have narrowed. So people are getting closer and closer together in name and age, similar to women's preferences. Also, at the time, you have women who would, I say they show that they were more likely to trade looks for security, which you see also today. You can see with the sprinkle movement, blah, blah, blah. I think that's the tale's oldest time, looking young, searching for money, et cetera, et cetera. Also, I want to say about today's trends, while you may have many women still express comfort in dating slightly older partners, there's actually been an observable shift with women being more open to dating younger partners compared to the 1980s. So the idea that the age gap must strictly, favor men dating younger women hasn't completely stayed the same, right? But as I was saying, back to the 80s, women were more likely to trade youth and attractiveness for security. Also, men tend to date it socioeconomically down, women more socioeconomically up. Also, these are just preferences, by the way. And also people generally, and this is actually not a preference, this just happened. Generally, people would match based upon their attractiveness level. So, say someone was a normal looking person, they would date another normal looking person. If somebody was significantly attractive, they would tend to date somebody significantly attractive. And that's kind of what they found. Oh, I gotta get used to this, guys. I've got my new things. Now we are on the rise of the middleman. So the preferences themselves haven't disappeared, but they strongly, how they operated, have changed. How do I say this? They have, how they rigidly constrain the outcomes has softened in modern dating markets, okay? So mediated introductions as the norm. This is what these two periods have in common. Across 1988, 1989 to 2007, and today, people increasingly meet through filters, right? They meet through friends, they meet through family, they meet through newspapers, they meet through dating sites or organized events, rather than spontaneous one-on-one approaches. I think it's showing that the norm is becoming having that intro, having that matchmaker, whether that be a virtual matchmaker through a dating site, whether that be through a friend, whether that be through a newspaper, whatever the median is, it doesn't seem to matter. It's always being filtered through something. So dating is experienced through a screened lens, not purely an individual interactive experience. We also have reduced direct social risk. So these mediated systems have lowered uncertainty by providing social context, reputational cues, and perceived safety before interaction. We also have a chronic lack of personal time throughout both periods. In all periods, dating was constrained by work, by ambition, by competing demands, by limited time, by energy availability for courtship. And we also have efficiency over exploration. So time scarcity pushed people towards structure, efficient dating methods instead of open-ended socializing. You know, I think that's kind of similar today. I don't think people do too much open-ended socializing going on. Now, dating as one priority among many, relationships competed with career, like I said, education, personal survival, rather than serving as a central organization goal. Gap between ideas and outcomes in both the 1988 and 1989 and 2000, people stated preferences around age and social economic statuses and attractiveness. Yet the pairings consistently convey towards similarity, right? You attract what you are, and partners close in age. So when we're talking about comparable social economic standings within similar attractiveness levels, preferences persisted, but outcomes were normalized towards equality, is essentially what I'm saying here, rather than having these extremes. So what I'm really seeing with these periods isn't like a revolution of new relationship norms, but rather a normalization of the new mediation layers. The ideas around love, status, attraction, and partnerships have stayed mostly the same, but what has changed is how those ideas were expressed with personals, with dating sites, with organized dating events, and speed dating become the norm. People suddenly had places to state what they wanted out loud. And I think that is happening a lot more and more as we grow through these Rahu periods, right? As we hit these 18-year cycles of Rahu, more and more we're being vocalized about people's preferences and standards, and all of that information and data is circulating out there. So instead of their desire stating private, it's going through a lot of these, it's being announced essentially. It's being announced to the world and put on display instead of saying within their niche social circles, okay? That is something I want to say. You can see at large scales what people are hoping for and what they're wishing for and what they're asking for and what they believe they deserve, okay? However, it seems more than likely these wishes don't always get fulfilled. They're just more visible, right? And so it really isn't about relationships changing at its core. It's about the hopes and wishes being broadcast, which is why Rahu is connected to the sign of Aquarius, the sign of hopes and wishes. People are projecting their desires onto new systems and believing the system itself might deliver what they were looking for, even if the outcomes largely stay the same. Hold on, guys. Lost my place here. There we go. Now we're going into money, 2007. So when it comes to money, the U.S. economy in 2007 sat on the precipice of the financial crisis. We know this. Many households carried unusual high levels of debt from mortgages, credit cards, loans, making them vulnerable if incomes fell or asset prices dropped. So in the UK, 2007, conditions were pretty similar, with higher consumer debt, reliance on credit cards. When Northern Rock sought emergency support from the Bank of England in September 2007, it signaled that the bank might not have enough cash for withdrawals, triggering panic and a bank run. So a lot of customers were rushing to withdraw their money at the same time, increasing the risk for the bank to become insolvent. During this period, the Federal Reserve also provided short-term credit, meaning temporary loans lasting days, to banks that were facing immediate cash shortages. This was going on in the U.S. So many banks that had heavily issued subprime mortgages, which are home loans given to borrowers with weak credit, low income, or having high existing debt. A large number of these loans were structured through low initial payments that would after that it would increase, which caused many borrowers to fall behind. As these loans failed, the problem wasn't just the individual borrowers. I don't know why I can't speak today. It was the system itself, which encouraged and packaged these low risky scale bonds, to be honest. The Federal Reserve stepped in not only to reward bad behavior, which is not really its intention, but it kind of did, but it was trying to keep the banking system functioning. If major banks failed suddenly, then the impact would hit everyday people immediately. So you would have frozen paychecks. You would have lost or inaccessible deposits, ATMs not working, businesses unable to make payroll, credit cards shutting off. So this was an invention. It was meant to prevent the system-wide collapse because the damage of inaction would have been far, far worse, depending on the cost of stepping in. You know what I mean? Would have been worse. So we have in the U.S. in 2007, the economy sat on this crisis. We have Rahu, when it went into Dhanishta, I want to say this, it became clear that the housing crisis was not going to be contained as the feds would have liked. And it actually spread throughout the entire system. You know, housing prices fell, defaults increased, and it was revealed that the problem was structural and system-wide instead of isolated. It exposed the reality of interconnectedness. Banks, issuers, investors, global institutions were all tied together. So no failure or area was safe. You know, it just cascaded throughout the entire system. As confidence collapsed, lending froze, and liquidity support alone could no longer be the normal functioning. So as you guys are coming in, I'm just going to pause right there. What is going on here? Hopefully this is... Sorry, guys. My thing says it's cut off. Can you guys see me or hear me? I don't know what's happening with my computer. All right. I think I'm here. Whatever, I'm alive, even if my setting changed. So I was going to say, I wanted to pause right there to give you a moment to say, you know, we're talking about Rahu and Shatabhisha, and I'm going through the history of what has happened. We're pausing here to discuss the fact that, as you can see, when Rahu went in Shatabhisha, we start to see these cracks in the money system, the illusion of Rahu. People thought that the housing prices would just continue to rise and grow. And so people got a little bit greedy. And, you know, we start seeing those cracks as Rahu made its way into Shatabhisha. And I'm going to talk about that comparison for today. When we get to 2025. So hold on to that. Hold on to that. It's just amazing to see that. And then you see when Rahu goes into Dhanishta, the Mars ruled nakshatra, the lesser malefic, things start to fall apart. So let me get into this. So many banks were left holding mortgages-backed securities, which are basically bundles of home loans that the banks packaged together and sold to investors. So they believe by packaging all these different securities that it would be relatively safe, and it was expected to rise in value because housing prices were just assumed to keep increasing. Not really sure why they thought that, because if you just look at history, things go through a cycle. I guess they were just being optimistic based on the recent history. But then we have, obviously, the housing prices fell, borrowers default, securities were worth far less than expected, and some were even just completely worthless. And at the core, there was this assumption that was proved false, essentially. In India in 2007, there actually was a little bit of a different situation going on there. We had the rapid expansion of the middle class. So this was a continuing trend actually from the 90s. You had IT and software businesses business processing outsourcing and telecommunications. They were on the rise in the early 2000s. Outsourcing from the US and European firms were largely motivated to, I guess, hire people from India. It was basically motivated by lower wages at first and favorable exchange rates. However, by 2007, essentially, a lot of the motivation had to do with expertise, because by then India had developed a deep talent in those areas of IT, software, and BPO. So among the urban higher educated populations, this actually grew their middle class, and it was accompanied by longer working hours and career prioritization, which eventually sort of delayed, marriage, which kind of reflect those Western trends of having more of a delayed marriage, getting married in your 30s, etc. But ultimately, it was good because it gave more people money. Now in 2007, Nigeria, because you guys know I'd like to pick random countries, so we're not just concentrated on the US all the time. This was actually not as fortunate. Many Nigerians lived in poverty, with estimates showing about 54 to 60% living below the national poverty line, or maybe even 70 in some cases. On average, households face unreliable electricity. There was limited access to clean water, poor sanitation. Unemployment and underemployment were at an all-time high, which is very, very unfortunate. And this was very persistent. This was pretty much the general vibe of the nation. And although education was widely viewed as sort of like a path forward or a path out of poverty, as this period kind of went on, it was seen a little bit differently because it no longer guaranteed employment. So people started viewing education as kind of like maybe a waste of time or not worth the effort. Just because you couldn't get a job, which is, tragic, Essentially, the infrastructure, jobs, and economy failed to keep pace with the job growth going on there in Nigeria. And a lot of the revenue that was being pulled in from the oil industry was actually being sent to politicians, government reserves, politicians' family members, people who are already inside the circle, people who were already inside the loop. So the money just stayed at the top. If you weren't already in the know, if you weren't already part of the elite system, then essentially you were left out and you did not benefit from any of the growth that was going on in certain sectors. Especially when we talk about infrastructure in regions, when it comes to the rural areas, it was a lot worse for them. Let me scroll down. I'm getting used to clicking this thing, guys. Now let's go into 1988, 1989 when it comes to money. In 1988 and 1989, we actually saw economic expansion in the US, but not for everybody. This primarily benefited higher income and white households. For example, the median net worth of a black household, and this is net worth, not income, was $4,170 compared to a white household, which would be $43,280, 10 times more. So that gap actually hasn't really changed today. I'm pretty sure the white households is about, it's 9 times higher instead of 10 times higher. It's actually Not that great of a change. So very disappointing there that hasn't changed since the 80s. In India in 1988, 1989, rural populations remain dependent on low productivity agriculture. So farming generated little income, offered very few paths forward when it comes to upward mobility. So if you were born a farmer, you probably stay a farmer, you know. At the same time, we had women's labor, which was largely informal and unpaid. Okay, so women were basically working extensively, but they didn't generate any income. So their work might be within planting, weeding, harvesting. You might have them drying, grain was part of, and storing grain, domestic labor, you know, all of that unpaid caregiving, taking care of the household. Basically, their job was to enable the male to go out and make the bacon. So not a lot of things happening in terms of good things going on for women. That's very sad. There were some informal activities, like you might sell vegetables, you might sell milk or handmade goods, but you more than likely weren't making a lot of money from that, pretty much low wages. So I will say that there was some modest economic growth when it came to 1988 and 1989, but it was concentrated in the government services, state-controlled sectors, civil services, public administration, gas, utilities, banks, financial institutions. These are the areas that were doing a little bit better. But this really only affected, once again, you know, an educated urban population, and mostly benefited men. So if you were somebody who was a man at that time and you were in an urban population, you'd actually probably do pretty decently and you'd have some upward mobility, but everyone else not so much. Okay, so I do want to say that going on here. In 1989, 1988, we have in Nigeria, poverty actually increased about 12 to 13% from 1985 to 1993, alongside the devaluation of the Nigerian currency. So there was this program, the Structural Adjustment Program, or SAP, that was introduced in 1986. With the goal of this program was essentially trying to promote the private sector and diversify the economy. And basically to do that, they removed subsidies and reduced welfare spending, which ultimately led to inflation, rising food costs and transportation costs, increased debt, declining standards in living. Wasn't a good idea. They pretty much kind of got rid of government assistance. So not the smartest move. From September 1988 to May 1989, the average life of a woman in Nigeria was basically a study in profound contradiction. So while on the national stage, there was this rhetoric of empowerment, and essentially we had a lot of people saying, you know, go women, we're trying to make avenues and ways for women to succeed. Everyday life was actually kind of a bit of a struggle. So I do want to say that during this time, there were a lot of structural adjustments and policies that triggered a mass surge in inflation. Like I said, peaking at 40% in 1989. This created a lot of economic instability, basically crushing the care burden, which fell basically mainly on women. So food prices skyrocketed, and meeting basic nutritional needs for like children and everyday life was pretty much an exhaustive battle. So for women in rural areas, the crumbling national infrastructure meant that sourcing water and fuel transformed into a full-time job. That's what they did with their time, looking for fuel and water, and pretty much not that great. That's pretty much a nightmare situation here going on. a lot of people downsizing, a lot of firms having to prioritize male employees. So if you were a woman and you actually had a job at the time and it was a decent job, you'd probably get fired because they were going to choose you over a male. At this time, obviously, Nigerian social structure was rigidly patriarchal. Households were strictly under the, man's thumb, man's rule, with him having agency over the assets. I will say one sort of notable silver lining for this period was that we had the Better Life program for rural women, which was funded by a lot of state grants and also some donations. So it was a little controversial at this time because, as we saw, they wanted to pull away from government support and state grants. So there was a little bit of friction when it comes to that. But, the first lady, Miriam, I want to say her name right, Babangida, hopefully that was right. She pushed this movement for standards when it comes to hygiene, healthcare, motivating people to have their own money and things along the lines of that. Well, motivating women to have their own money. And this progress was basically symbolic, and the movement basically became the backbone for a lot of lofty ideas that were eventually built upon later. Okay, I want to say that. So people kind of took inspiration from that movement. And also you had a lot of people, women at this time, they sort of formed independent co-ops. So they came together and they functioned as a collective financial sanctuary. And women in these co-ops for the first time were able to have their own money or bank accounts, even if it wasn't a lot of money. And it was the first time they didn't have to sort of go through their husbands or didn't have to lean on them for financial independence. So it did that one good thing. I do want to say that when it comes to any positive news, because I didn't want it to be too depressing. I didn't. Now we are into the illusion of progress. So when we're talking about these Rahu cycles of 1988, 1989, 2007, these periods share this core haunting illusion of progress. In both eras, we have a loud public narrative, promise economic growth and betterment for human conditions. But essentially the grounded reality for the average person was increasing debt and vulnerability and basically systemic exclusion going on here. We have a controlled squeeze in both periods. Households were squeezed by massive forces entirely beyond their control. You had the SNAP program in Nigeria, or the subprime mortgage crisis in the UK and the US, with essentially having identical outcomes, which is the cost of living aggressively outpaced income. These weren't just bad times. These were systematic shifts that left the upper and lower classes basically suffocating under the economic systems. So that was something in common for both periods. Then we have no one's basically bigger than the program. So history shows us through these periods that the system chooses who to save when the cracks appear. As the saying goes, like I said, no one is bigger than the program. The program is fundamentally built to protect the elites, the ethnic majorities, which we saw when it came to the Federal Reserve and the Bank of England. Now, they stepped in to save a lot of banking institutions, as they should have. However, they were supposed to be built to protect everyone. And so why the focus was only focused on banks and institutions rather than individual homeowners and other people who had foreclosures, that's a pretty problematic decision because, like I said, they're there for everyone, not just for banks, not just for financial institutions. Then we have this two-tiered reality and the urban flow. So both areas revealed a stark, jagged difference between the haves and the have-nots. those who were safe inside the system versus those who were left on the outside. In 1988 and 1989, we had that growth in India and Nigeria, which was strictly for those urban elites. And because Rahu governs basically, how do I say, it governs infrastructure for people who are in technologically advanced modern spaces. You know, it's more so modern living. So a city would be something Rahuvian. So because Rahu rules these spaces, we see wealth flow towards those urban centers, leaving rural populations behind, women stuck unpaid or in informal labor. And then we have those in the rural environment who are not benefiting from the GDP growth at all. You know, there's no trickle down effect. They are still at that poverty line or below it. So there's progress happening elsewhere. We also have secrets and the paper wealth. So we want to look at specifically the astrological signatures of these illusions. In 1988 and 1989, with Aquarius pushing themes of basically collective progress, Nigerians saw that better life movement, and it basically shouted, we kind of have programs for women, though the average person couldn't perform, you know, they didn't have a loaf of bread. And so there we have this illusion, right? We have this, everything's great, everything's fine, but not really, you know, people can't buy bread, you know. Then we also have this illusion that shifted the housing crisis, where we have this false gospel that the housing prices will keep being up and they keep growing and da 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 da. But in actuality, that wasn't the case. And then also you had this idea that if you owned a home, that you were somebody who was doing good, you were wealthy, you had a lot of good things going for you. But in reality, a lot of people were house poor. And this period sort of broke that illusion here. They couldn't keep up with the interest payments that had increased. Now, this was the area of Shatabhisha, as I said. This is the 100 physicians. This is the hidden circle. And this is the space of secrets and complex opaque systems. And Rahu moved through this nakshatra. The cracks in the system were revealed. We saw, like I said, the wealthy people remaining wealthy, them saying, hey, we're helping people, but not really. And then we also have this, basically things look good on paper, but behind it, things were more complex, and essentially things began to crumble. So I do want to say that. Not the most pick-me-up energy, guys. I don't mean to be Debbie Downer here. I'm really not. I'm just looking at the history and what happened and saying that. And sometimes history is not a pretty sight, unfortunately. I really wish it was. Let me pause here because I'm a little thirsty. And if you're just coming in, I am going through Rahu and Shatabhisha, the transit. We just went through love and dating. We went through that for 2007, 1988. We also went to money, 2007, 1988, 1989. We looked at a few different countries. So feel free to look back at all of that information. I know it's a lot. Excuse me. I wanted to do a decent amount of research so we can really get a feel of what it was like to have Rahu and Shatabhisha. And then I will get to your signs, I promise you. I know that's what everyone's here for. And I just wanted to say hi to everyone coming in and thank you for listening to me. I love astrology, so I definitely want to make more videos like this because as you can see, it's quite long and time consuming. So now we are on to the hidden gift of Shatabhisha. The collapse of these illusions, though it was brutal, it was a necessary catalyst for forcing transition from blind trust in the system to the birth of the independent voice. This represents the hidden gift of Shatabhisha, which translates, like I said, into 100 healers, signifying profound healing only through crisis. So with Rahu, we have these disrupted traditional structures of 1989 and 2000, and it delivered also these technological tools from the dawn of the World Wide Web to the launch of the smartphone. And then we also had the average person bypassing gatekeepers. So this shift totally transformed the hustle, into a viable career, essentially. We have individuals who were no longer feeling inspired to rely on a crumbling system. Instead, they wanted to become the architects of their own life. People quickly took advantage of this new landscape, and it fueled the rise of the gig and the creator economy to reclaim their agency, We have people who were leveraging decentralized platforms. They moved away from corporate dependency and built their own systems of income for survival. I do want to say that. So, for example, after the 2008 crisis, that's when you have people, the creation of Bitcoin, right? Because people are like, oh, we can't trust all of this going on. The banks are failing, etc. We need something decentralized. The government is choosing to protect the banks and not the people. We need something away from that, right? We had, as we saw in Nigeria, we had them creating those, collective coup accounts that would help shield them from their husband's control of finances. And then even today, we have the modern freelancer. So the focus has slowly shifted from radical reliance on the system to more so reliance on the self. And I feel like this is the work of the 100 Physicians in Actions. It's about healing trauma of the systemic portrayal of society. It's about looking at where there are gaps in the system, where there are people being left behind, where there's corruption. And ultimately, it is about the individual powering themselves. We have these illusions being shattered. And we have basically this lesson that the program fails us, and it's the job of the people to essentially save themselves. So that is a central theme that we have going on here. And then I've also gave you that analogy when it came to Bitcoin and everything like that. And then we also have that digital upward mobility because of the rise of the iPhone. We had like that creation of YouTube and, all of this, it totally shifted the landscape when it comes to systems. So I really do think this is what Rahu brings. It brings this. We can't rely on this system, so we've got to go here and we've got to do our own thing and switch the traditional vibes up, So it essentially puts people in a position of survival, and then they've got to work their way out of that, having that grit to focus on a new reality. Now we are moving on to today, okay? So Shatabhisha period. 2000, which I gave you the dates, is 2026, November 2025 to August 2026, okay? Go back to the beginning and get the actual dates, okay? So what we're looking at here for me, I really feel as though it is possible that we may have some collective crisis or some shift in reality, or it may become more apparent, which I think that's already here because, like I said, we have this Rahuvian energy here about who has the power, who has the control. And I think we can see that with our current reality and government. A lot of corporations have power. And it's actually interesting because there was this conversation about how, I think at the beginning of Trump's second term that, he was a puppet to the corporations and, they were like, he's Elon is the real president, etc. But then Trump kind of came through and showed who was the one who really had the power, which is ultimately the president. The United States president is still one of the most powerful positions in the world. And we just can see just how powerful that position is because, he just took the president of Venezuela. Who takes a leader of a country? That's so extreme. So we can see just who's in power, how much power they actually have. And these things get revealed to us more and more when we go into this Rahu Shatabhisha feel to it. So I do want to say that. There might also be, like I said, this significant illusion dismantlement going on here that we see, like the myth of corporate stability. I think that's coming to light more and more, especially when we talk about shadow banking, right? So in layman's terms, shadow banking is a massive private financial world that operates outside of the rules of traditional banking. And this is not some conspiracy theory, guys. This is real. Like, you can go look up financial articles on shadow banking. It's a real thing that happens. So this restriction, I'll say this, traditional banking is traditionally more restrictive. Like, they're regulated by the government. So they have a lot more rules on who they can lend to and what interest rates they can charge and what time period they can give when it comes to like paying back loans and etc. Things like that. However, private lenders, which are the shadow bankers, they don't have that. So companies like Aries, Blackstone, Apollo, these are essentially, they're not banks. What they are is, I guess you could call them massive pawn shops for corporations. They charge very high interest rates of around like 10% or more, very high interest rate, right? And essentially, they form these private contracts that the government can't watch. It's a private contract, and the public has no record of how much debt is piling up. So if a company fails to pay these private lenders, they don't just foreclose. Essentially, these private lenders can seize the entire company. So, for example, we have Forever 21. And I'm pretty sure that they went through a private equity situation like this, where they had a lot of debt and took out a lot of different loans. And then as a result, they can't afford to pay it back. They can't stay in business. The company can just take over and start selling it off, right? And close things. So there's that. And even if you are a company, like, for example, I'll give you this example. Let's say Starbucks, right? Starbucks itself is not necessarily one of these mid-tier companies that has to go through one of these shadow banking companies. However, the places that they get their beans and coffees from, or their plastics or their cups, these companies might actually go through the shadow banking. They may take out a loan and they might have to pay these interests, and they have these high interest fees. And so what they do is they have to charge Starbucks more money. They said, hey, you want these cups from us? We got to charge you more money for it. Starbucks has to pay that money. Now your coffee goes from $5 to $7. And so this is why it becomes problematic, right? The prices go up. So we're going to get into this. I told you guys this was long. I wanted to get you the real tea. And so the thing is, the issue with this is we don't see how much debt is piling up. And right now, there's a guesstimation that the market is worth about 1.7 trillion in debt, So to put that in perspective, that is more money than the entire value of silver in the entire world. Okay. It's something serious. And so in the US alone, there are about 3,600 businesses that employ about 1.6 million people that are currently being kept afloat through these high interest private loans. And remember, guys, these are all guesstimations because we don't know. We don't know who has the loans. These are private loans. these mid-sized companies are essentially the engine room of the economy, providing the majority of like these stable middle-class jobs for a lot of different people. But because they have shadow debt, they have pioneered essentially, I think you'll notice this trend, right? It's called the forever layoff. So what the forever layoff is essentially like a slow bleed. So instead of we having these massive headlining layoffs, which you'll see those every now and then, most companies, what they'll do is they'll lay off like 10 people, 20 people, and they'll do so every few months. So you slowly start see people disappearing, right? And I don't know about you guys, but I've definitely seen this go on within companies and places that I have worked. This has been a trend for a minute, but we may start to see it more and more. In fact, we will probably see it more and more because I did my research and, you know, people agreed. So the purpose basically of this slow bleed, of this slow firing of people, if you don't know this, salaries are actually one of the biggest expenses for companies. Like I know that because I'm a project manager, and you know, part of having to manage a project is you kind of have to know everyone's salary because you have to know how much people are getting paid because you have a certain budget for a project, right? So one of the biggest expenses when it comes to companies are salaries. And so they cut people to make these lenders happy. They say, okay, we can't afford to pay you guys back this month. We're not making that much money. Let's fire this accountant. Let's fire this secretary. Let's fire this janitor. Like, you know what I mean? Like they'll start slowly laying people off. And so what happens is we're slowly destroying the illusion of job security. And I think that conversation is happening more and more. I see it a lot on social media where people talk about how, you know, previously maybe baby boomers generation, maybe even Gen X, so to some degree, you have people who can work at companies for 10 years, 20 years. And some places people still do that, but it's becoming less and less of the norm. And the norm now is more so wanting to find the next role or knowing that you're probably not going to be in this job for 25 years, 30 years. And so, like I said, the illusion of job security is being shattered. You see how it's a trickle down effect when it comes to one thing after the other with the money. Follow the money, they say. So slowly these employees are being trimmed, and even if some people still keep their jobs, it ruins morale, right? You have a coworker one day, the next day they're gone. People start to feel a little bit insecure about their jobs. So one thing that this leads to is that we have, as I mentioned before, this gig economy. I don't know what word I'm trying to say. The independent architect, the people who are like, okay, so we have got to find a system away from relying on traditional structures here. There's a push towards radical autonomy. Even now you see this growth of entrepreneurs, and you see more people going towards social media, and you see it more and more now. You know, it started that iPhone era, that YouTube era, and now here in 2025, 2026, you can see more people pushing to be content creators or trying to find their own niche or creating their own business. And I'm not saying everyone's outright quitting their jobs. In fact, that is not happening. But you do see them trying to find that second source of income, right? More often than not. And so what I believe is going to happen more, and it's already starting to happen today, is companies are in this place where they may not be able to afford full-time staff. And so they look for hiring part-time people, or one thing that they do is they want to invest more so in AI, which is why you see a lot of companies push towards AI, because ultimately AI will save them more money if they can get it to work right. You know, there's a lot more I can say about that, just because as a project manager, you really can't have AI run by itself, but we'll get into that later. We'll get into another video. This video is long enough. You know, we're at the 1 hour mark. Can you believe it, guys? But essentially, This is why people are pushing more towards AI. The cost of having an employee is very high. And you'll see more people doing more fractional hiring, as I said. So people do more project-based hiring. Okay, we're going to hire somebody for marketing for 6 months and they'll work on this project and then we'll have to let them go. You know what I mean? Like things like that. And then, like I said, part-time employees. That's something that is going to be that may be happening here. So middle management roles being automated to save costs, as I said. You'll see people working together in teams, but they'll probably be like, what do they call it? Ageless teams. Like, you know, sometimes companies have, you have more younger groups of people working with younger groups of people. And that's just because of, you know, as you age, you gain more seniority usually. So now, since people might be more fractional and you're sort of hiring people based upon their expertise and them marketing themselves, maybe as a contractor or a freelancer, the teams start to get a little bit more diverse in age range or maybe even ethnicities or even country-wise, you know, just because we have that fractional hiring going on. This seems to be a trend that may be happening. Who knows how popular it will get, but I definitely can see that happening more and more for sure. But essentially, this transit proves that the program is, you know, it's no longer built to protect the worker. You don't have as many unions. You don't have as many employers doing 401k matches. You don't have companies trying to as much hold on to their employees when it comes to giving them, they'll try to hold on to them, but when it comes to giving them promotions or perks, you know, Leo in the house. Hey, Mona, how are you? How are you doing? It's lovely to see you. As you're going in, we're going to the astrology. I'm almost at you guys' signs, so thanks for sticking with me and my tangent about what's going on today. But as I was saying, we see that the system's no longer geared to protect the worker. It's not about like keeping people on board as much. And this is part of the broken system being revealed. And you see how shadow banking and finances all play a role in how it's working with the economy. So if we get into some forecasts and predictions, so this is what I think. I think, you know, the biggest cracks, I am well. So I'm glad that you are doing well as well. I probably could have phrased that better, but I am well. I'm very excited right now. I worked very hard on this video, so I love doing the astrology and talking about what's going on in the world. So I hope you enjoy it. And are you a Leo in Vedic astrology, or are you a Leo in Western? Because I'm doing it. I'll say this, guys. The astrology is for Vedic, and so you may want to look up your Vedic chart if you are not familiar with it. I do prefer to do things in Vedic astrology, but sometimes, you know, I'll do a little Western transit. You know, right now this week. Well, in Vedic astrology, this is happening in Sagittarius, where you have these close conjunction of the sun, the sun, Venus, and Mars coming together this week. So there's like this almost reset going on of energy, of feeling revitalized, feeling real renewed, maybe even a boost of energy, or, you know, setting some new patterns going on for yourself. So there is that going on. So what I predict here going on is that more than likely, I think that these private loans are probably going to hit their maturity date relatively soon, or at least we're going to see more refinancing going on this year, just because interest rates and, how do I say this? Just because interest rates seem to be going up a lot, there's a lot more inflation happening within the world, especially with tariffs. And so these mid-sized companies are kind of going to be pushed to refinance. And that's going to be part of a trickle-down structure where you might have people doing a little bit more layoffs going on here, you know. So you might have during the summer, you know, that, you know, this ends August 2nd. maybe even right after it, when we get into Danishta, that people might start losing a little bit more of their jobs. I could be wrong, but you know, you might expect more private seizures of companies and them taking over brands, private equity taking over those brands and their parts. So that could be going on. As I mentioned, companies will try to double down on that slow bleed. You don't want to capture too many headlines with the 1,000-person cuts. Maybe if you're Google or Facebook, but they've got it in the bag like that. They can just lay off whoever, it doesn't matter. But most people are going to want to keep it a little quiet because they don't want to come across unstable. You know, the whole thing is to make it seem like everything's fine. So this will keep the shadow lenders happy, but also, you know, it's going to keep the employees a little bit more anxious and having a lot more anxiety. We have job hugging because of this, because of that anxiety. I know a lot of people, they'll talk a lot of big game online and saying, oh, I'm looking for this job and I'm quitting this job and I can't stand it. But most people are job hugging. As I mentioned previously in another video, I'm trying to remember which one, but another video, a lot of people are job hugging right now. What is job hugging? That means even though you feel like this job has no growth, even though this job does not invest in you, even though you cannot stand your boss, your manager, your coworkers, the commute, you are keeping to that job because you recognize that the economy is not in the best of shape. And so you'll feel like a lot of people are job hugging, okay, right now. And I really do feel like that's going to be happening a little bit more and more, where nobody is moving up the ladder as much. People aren't getting promoted as much. You'll see a lot of stagnation. Especially until 2026. But generally Danishta is going to bring a lot more pushback because Danishta is like this explosive energy. Think about the financial crisis and how that just plummeted the stock market. I was born overseas, a military brat, and parents don't remember my birth time, so I can't get an accurate birth chart. Oh, that's disappointing. That's okay that you don't have your birth chart though. What's your, you can go by your Vedic sun. So if you are a Western sun in Leo, you might be a Cancer in, if you are a Western sun in Leo, you might be a Cancer in Vedic, unless you are a late degrees Leo. Like if you're 29 degrees, 26 degrees sun in Leo, you might fall into still Leo, you know. So it's okay, but if you don't have your birth chart, you can still do things by the sun. I found the sun to be accurate as well. So when we get to your signs, just go by your sun, you know. It's a different vibe, but it will definitely have some accuracy. The sun's a little bit more career, vitality, hopes, wishes, goals for yourself, and whether you feel a lot of energy, you know, like how you feel. Like if you had like Saturn right next to your sun, like it's in the, let's say your Saturn is in the first house, your sun's in the second house, you might feel a little bit tired. You might feel a little bit slow. So that's kind of like what I mean by your vitality. Also, what we see here is I feel like there is going to be more of the rise of that, you know, independent architect. I think more people are going to push towards starting their businesses, self-employment, especially women, because we saw that these trends, there was more slightly independence for women. Not as much, but I think women are going to be the trendsetters when it comes to the architects, because that Astro-Tarot energy protects those who are already in the circle. Okay, if it already protects people who are in the circle, then that's going to represent men, people who are, whoever is benefiting the most in your country. They might receive a boost. So more than likely women are going to be the ones who go off and do the more alternative thing. So we're going to see more solopreneurs, and they're probably going to try to use AI to start their own teams or technology to move forward in some way. You're going to see, and this is just based off of just research, you know, a massive fight between the public and the Federal Reserve, the government, over interest rates come August. I believe Jerome Powell, I think he ends his, does he end in May, his retirement? And so that's not exactly ideal, because there is talks about people believing that Trump is going to put someone in there who's a bit of a puppet. And if he puts someone in or manages to get someone in there that's under his thumb or under his influence, for sure he's going to lower his interest rates. And some people may think, oh yeah, this is great, da 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 da, if we lower interest rates. However, if you lower interest rates, that decreases the value of the dollar. And so essentially think about this. Let's say you have a paycheck for $3,000 and now the interest rates are lowered. Now your paycheck might be worth $2,800. That's how much buying power it has. So at first it feels like, oh, interest rates are lower, I can buy a house or a car, or businesses can buy, take out more loans to hire more people, but eventually it catches up to you. So your employees have less spending power, which means they're going to want to ask for a raise, or they're going to want to jump shift, or they're going to want to push back. And you can see how things get a little bit messy if we do that. But obviously, I don't think Trump's thinking that way. It wouldn't really affect him. He's a billionaire and he's the president. So he's thinking about the people he hit for himself and the people that he represents, which are generally going to be those Mag 7 companies, right? Now, I wanted to talk about Venezuela real quick. This was a last minute ad. Last minute ad, guide. I promise you, we're getting there. So what I thought was interesting when it came to Venezuela, with everything that was going on, is that actually the last time that Rahu was in Shatabhisha, you actually had, this was when we had basically the seizure of those oil infrastructures. Is that the word I want to use? Let me step back. So we can look at the situation going on in Venezuela today. And if you don't know what's going on, Trump just captured the president of Venezuela, and he claimed it was for sort of like drug trafficking and everything like that. But it doesn't really make sense, because he just pardoned the president of Honduras for, you know, selling drugs to the US. So it's not really adding up. But essentially, back in May 2007, the Venezuelan government under Hugo Chavez kicked out partners like ConocoPhillips and ExxonMobil, and they seized their equipment and oil fields without paying them. So this was actually the last time that Rahu was in Shatabhisha. So it's actually funny that this is coming up again. And by funny, I mean, you know, no surprise, right? These trends happen. The things that happened to the past pop up again when Rahu's like, hey, I'm home again. Remember Venezuela? Let's talk about it, you know? So it's happening again. But this time, you know, it's almost as if the companies are getting like their revenge in a way, or this is coming back to them, Venezuela. So for 19 years, Venezuela refused to pay the bill. ConocoPhillips, I believe, actually won in the world courts or international courts when it came to having their equipment seized. Essentially, international courts said, hey, Venezuela, that wasn't right. You've got to give ConocoPhillips their money. And Venezuela was like, we're not going to do that. So here we are 19 years later, and the US would like some oil. And what they have decided is to sort of create a narrative to say that, you know, we are protecting the American people and we have to stop the president of Venezuela. And I'm not saying he was a great guy at all. I'm not defending him. But they're using this as a way to get back in, along with the fact that some oil companies have not been paid. And so because essentially Venezuela has not paid that debt to all of these oil companies for their equipment who they kicked out, they actually have a very high balloon tax bill in the billions and billions of dollars, right? So they're using these two things as an excuse to get back in there. Oh, and I'm sorry you're tired today, Mona. I'm very sorry. And that is happening right now. And I wanted to bring to your attention that this is sort of like this pot of gold problem. And we talked about this a little bit in comparison to like Nigeria, right? Where Nigeria can actually serve as a warning to Venezuela. So despite producing billions of dollars in oil, over 40% of the population was in poverty. And there's still a lot of things going on there today. And this is sort of known as the resource curse in action. So when a country sits on a pot of gold like oil, like Venezuela, they kind of neglect other areas because the money that comes from the ground, the oil, the government doesn't feel the need to invest in different structures because they're doing good, they're fine. They stop investing in farms, schools, hospitals, basic infrastructure. And as a result, you know, the country becomes like this one-trick pony. You know, the oil drops and the pipes break, and basically the country kind of starves itself because there's no other business to fall back on. And this is why we have Venezuela's GDP today actually being pretty high relative to the fact that it is suffering. It's pretty bad there, okay? The average citizen remains in poverty. And in fact, I can't remember the percentage. I think they said 20% of the people have left the country, which is wild to think about. And so with the U.S. coming in, I don't necessarily think that this problem will be better. The U.S. has no incentive to continue to invest in Venezuela outside of oil. So it would be really up to the people to figure that situation out. And like I said, you want to look to countries that this has happened to before. Nigeria has these big oil reserves. And you can see how the infrastructure is still sort of slacking. And there's just a lot of fight from outside sources and other countries for their oil. And Nigeria barely benefits. More than likely, something similar is going to continue to happen to Venezuela. Not sure if it'll get worse or better. In my opinion, it may get worse just because when you have this period of instability, you have a lot of people fighting for power. And so it may feel like a moment of relief, but, you know, I don't foresee this actually being something to be happy about in the next couple of years. So we have that power vacuum. So as I was saying, once you have a dictator removed, you have a lot of people who are happy, who celebrate, to get excited. But then you get into this weird space of a dual government. And is the U.S. running it? Is it the vice president? What's going on here? It just creates a lot of dangerous fighting for control and a lot of uncertainty going on there. So I just want to say that, you know, I'm just wanting to give those examples and the fact that we have similar situations going on other places in the world that have happened before that are mirroring today. And that is what I wanted to say. And so in May 2007, you know, they had that wealth seized. Today, the companies had their wealth seized. Today in 2026, those companies are sort of getting back in there, not like they're raising their hands to jump on in, but more than likely they're going to get back in there. You know, they for sure, that is trillions of dollars worth of oil and money that is happening. But it is likely that Venezuela is going to kind of go back, fall down that Nigerian path where the oil is extradited by foreign debts and the actual citizens are stuck in sort of like this war zone, competing rebels and foreign administrators. So that is a very likely scenario. Now, guys, finally, we're getting into your sign. We're getting into it. If you have stayed with me this whole time, thank you. If you're just now coming in, we are talking about Rahu and Shatabhisha. We have been talking about it for the past hour and a half going on here. I wanted to give you a lot of history of what was going on. We talked about love. We talked about dating. We talked about the last time Rahu was in Shatabhisha. We talked about the current modern day energy going on with Venezuela and how this was part of the May 2007 story when Rahu was in Shatabhisha. And so it is not surprising that this event is coming back up again. In fact, you might even find that in your own life, where I'll say this, Rahu is kind of like Kill Bill energy, where Rahu's like Bill and he thinks someone has wronged him and he's coming back in with a vengeance, and it might be displaced sort of like anger or maybe a lot of confusion there, and it kind of creates more chaos. And as we see with Rahu, you know, even if it wants to be well intended, it can often lead to chaos. Like this SAP program going on in Africa. You know, it wanted people to be more independent. It wanted to boost its private sector, but then, you know, it kind of caused a lot of issues going on there. So there is that. And so we have all of that going on, guys. So as I mentioned before at the start of this video, Rahu will be in triple dignity on January 25th, 2025. So ultimate Rahuvian energy going on there. Very aspirational, very much like, okay, I want to fix this crisis going on in my life, this issue going on. You might want to look back if you were, depending on what age you were at this time, you might want to look back to 1988, 1989. And you definitely want to look back to to 2007 to see where your life was at then and what it was doing for you at that time to get a feel for this energy, because your personal chart may be a little bit different than the world events and the vibes, but the vibes will definitely reach you because we all live on the same planet together, right? Let me get some coffee here. I love coffee, guys, but I should probably drink a little bit less of it. All right, so excuse me. So we see things, big cracks in the system, hidden gifts, hidden talents, things that will allow us to become the architects of our own lives. We stop relying on systems. We start becoming our own boss. We have illusions revealed to us. We start looking at things that inspire us and trying to shoot and reach for the stars. And we start to be a little bit more aspirational. I want to become this. I want to do this. These are my dreams. These are my goals. And we start going towards them. We also have a little bit of energy coming back up, like I said, from the past, blast from the past coming through in unexpected ways. That could be going on here. Though I will say Rahu actually rules more so new karma, meaning the karma that you make for yourself as you move forward, because Rahu represents the future. It represents moving forward. And so this is a time in our lives where we are creating new karma for ourselves, maybe even shadow karma to be on theme. Now, welcome, Aries. We are finally at your sign. Yeah, I know you guys have been patient, and thank you guys for being patient with me. So Aries, no time like the present. We have hopes, wishes, and social networks. You're feeling that full Rahuvian energy. So right away, we know that Rahu here's selectivity becomes unavoidable. So remember how we talked about Rahu protecting the elite, protecting those in the circle. And I want to say that Rahu's symbol is the empty circle here, which I have found to connect to sort of like protection. Like when I look at Rahuvian people, they say like, we have my friends, then I have people who are a little bit outside the circle, who are acquaintances, and I have people a little bit further away from that, and people a little further away from that. And so there is this theme of elitism that we've actually seen here repetitively when it comes to Rahu during these periods here. And I wanted to talk about how you might start to be a little bit more selective about who you surround yourself by at this time, where Rahu energy is more aspirational. And so you might want to be around people who seem to have big hopes and wishes and goals, or have a lot of more markers of success. Maybe they have really good jobs. Maybe they're just very interesting people. Maybe they're foreign. Maybe you feel as though they are innovative in their mindset. Maybe they have very unique ideas, but whatever the case may be, you're not allowing everyone to have access to your time and energy. Don't get me wrong. There is an aspect of Rahu that is like, I'll socialize with people, I'll be among the people, I'll talk to them, Like I said, it's that circle energy and outwardly going on, but the level of interaction, who you keep truly close to you, you're probably going to want to be around people who embody that sort of idealistic, like, energy. Like, you know what I mean? Like, hey, I have a nice house, nice car, or I'm somebody who has a master's degree, PhD, doctorate, highly educated. You know what I mean? This is what I mean by markers of success. But this doesn't mean like you're like saying, I'm not socializing with anyone. If anything, you might find yourself meeting more and more people. For example, I remember when Rahu went through my 7th house, not exactly the same thing, but it is one of those air sign houses. So it will trine the 11th house. And that was a time where I was surrounded by people who were essentially very expert in their field. They had a long list of accomplishments. And so you might find yourself in that place at this time. So during this transit, the contrast between the haves and have-nots, especially within your social circle, or at work or within your groups, people who you spend time with. If you're in a rock collecting club, you're going to start to see the stark differences between who has what and who does not. And you might, like I said, become more intentional about who you support and give your energy to. This isn't really about cruelty. It's about survival and wanting to level up. And that might be part of your journey. One thing that this can also represent is because the 11th house represents hopes and wishes, and Rahu represents material gains, as we know, is that this can definitely represent some sort of windfall of money, or even some sort of boost in that area that could be going on in love and health. This looks like prioritizing connections that improve your life. And like I said, distancing yourself from people who will strain your resources, or you just don't find them to be motivating at all. You're just like, I don't know, this person doesn't seem to really add too much value into my life, and I feel like they're killing my momentum, and I don't know, the vibes just seem a little bit off. That can happen when we talk about Rahu here. But either way, you want to expand yourself to environments that push you towards your idealistic future. So what that can look like is, like I said, you're evaluating who you spend your time with. If somebody feels fake or empty, you don't want to spend too much time around them unless they provide some benefit. But even then, you're just like, I don't really want to be around this person. Arguably, I don't think this person's good. And so I'm going to keep them at a little bit more of a distance. Also, you might feel the need to quit some sort of big corporate networking group. You know what I mean? Like, if you're a part of a group that isn't moving you forward, or isn't providing you, like I said, the space to grow, to develop, to be in the place that you want to be in the future, you're probably going to drop that environment. You're going to say, oh, I don't know, like it doesn't seem like I can relate to this group here. Everyone seems to be maybe more happy with a simplistic life, and you have this big vision for yourself, and you're just like, I don't know. I don't think this is where I need to be. Another example is like, you could become a freelancer, and you're like, I want to, or you're like, I want to work at like an ethical startup, like a tech startup or something like that, because like I said, Rahu moves technological things moving forward, and the 11th house is how you make your money. And so maybe you make your money in a very futuristic way, or like I said, just in a way that's more independent and outside the system. This can even represent like a family business. Not everyone has a family business, you know? So it's just saying more independent, less traditional ways of making the money, or even how you make your money or how you do your work. You can use a lot more AI tools, and that could be going on as well. So I do want you to know that and think about that. Now we are on to Taurus. So Taurus, this is happening in your career and public reputation house. And it's not even just, you know, like public reputation, like, you know, oh, she is joyful, or she's a, you know, a cold and distant person. It can represent, are you single? Are you married? You know, these are the things that we talk about when we talk about reputation as well. The 10th house definitely connects to those aspects of your life. And so Rahu in the 10th house can bring about an identity that is very innovative, intelligent, and ahead of the curve. Trust me. I've seen it one too many times. It also can bring an identity where somebody kind of views you as like the outsider. Like it's hard for you to fit in to those corporate environments. I use AI tools for my side business, advertising. Ooh, I like that. You're already into the vibes of forward thinking and innovation when it comes to this transit. This is a great time because you're following the vibes of Rahu, so you're probably going to learn a lot during this period rather than going against the grain or going with a more traditional route, you know. It's always better to align with the transit vibe. So congrats, Mona. So for you Tauruses, trust me, you might be looked at as someone who is bringing a skill set that is, if you're in a traditional environment, may not be entirely appreciated. And so this can actually be a lot of career changes. And I should say this, guys, this is Vedic chart, and you can go by your sun, you can go by your moon, you can go by your ascendant. This will affect all three, because I have already seen this with some Taurus moon people that I know for sure. They are already thinking about, I want to shift. Like, I don't want to work in this environment. I want to move somewhere else. I want X, Y, and Z. Like, I see them using it. It's surprisingly easy to use, and I'm older. See, I love that you said that, because I'll run into some people who are older and they make it seem like it's so complicated. And I'm like, no, the tools, they make it very, very easy. And some tools will even walk you through it. Let me tell you, ChatGPT taught me how to set up this little bar on the side here, guys. It walked me by step and how to do it in Canva. I just asked it, I showed it a picture, and it said, I got you. So yeah, AI is great. Also, when we talk about what's going on for you, Rahu doesn't, like I said, it doesn't thrive in hierarchy. It doesn't thrive in so slow systems. It doesn't like conservative leadership. And so if you're in that environment, you're going to get out of there. Also, if you're not being pushed ahead towards career growth, or you're not being promoted, or you're not getting the money you want, you're going to get out of there as well. So you might be going through a career shift at this time. Not saying it's necessarily all going to happen now, but I'll say this, come August, you're definitely going to be on that path to jump shift. I would be surprised if this year you stayed within your role, if this describes your environment, if it describes this traditional thing going on here. You also see cracks in your workplace, right? You'll start to see who the job really protects, who they really promote, who they really push forward, and basically where you sit on the hierarchy. It will become very, very obvious to you. I will say this, when you have Rahu in the 10th house, a lot of the time leadership is not exactly looking out for you. They want to protect their own interest. And so you're going to have to market yourself to the world, and you're going to have to do so by essentially being incredible, because Rahu's, like I said, is this planet that makes a good impression on people. It's like, oh, I've never seen that before, or oh, you're unique, or this or that. And this is just like what I've seen observationally. Now, when it comes to specifically this vibe of being in Astro-Tarot, like we said, it wants to bring about more independence away from a traditional system as well. And so when we're talking about a hierarchy system, you actually might get a lot of pushback from leadership who could be threatened by presence or ideas. This wants to put you in an environment where things are a little bit more even killed, because that's a less traditional environment, meaning like there's no like real super hierarchy. It's more so you're my teammate, I'm my teammate, we're working together to create something. That's something that Rahu would probably like a lot more. This can also represent abandoning an identity altogether. Do you define yourself for a new role? If you are in a space where you are job hugging and you are scared to make that leap or be pushed forward, this actually might, you actually might be thrown into a loop and actually be forced to make a move when it comes to this situation. As we talked about before, when we saw this Rahu transit Shatabhisha, there was a lot of instances of survival or things going bottom up, or even having to deal with, right now we have a lot of those forever layoffs. So not saying that you'll be laid off, but you know, that can happen with this transit here, because it doesn't want you to stay stagnant and it doesn't want you to rely on an old system. If you are single, you know, Rahu and Shatabhisha doesn't necessarily make you single or unsingle. What it does is it's going to make you, more than likely, people are going to know about your preferences. You know, like if you are somebody who wants to be single, everybody gonna know you want to be single, because you're probably gonna start announcing it. Remember how we had the personal ads in the 80s, and then, you know, in 2007 with the invention of the iPhone, we have everybody going to social media talking about what they like, what they don't like, da da da. Even now we have that going on today when it comes to social media. It's like being amplified, so your voice gets amplified in this direction. If you're married, everybody knows about it. Becomes a part of your reputation. If you're engaged, like who you're talking to, this is part of the story when it comes to here. It can represent having high standards for yourself as well. You also start to see cracks within your stable job. What I've seen with some people already is like they'll have a job and it's kind of like a golden handcuff situation. And so what that means is you get a lot of perks, and you get a lot of like, okay, we've got company stocks, and we've got you match 401k match, and we're taking you on a company trip, and you can get a discount on gym memberships, and you get a discount on food and DoorDash and da da da. You got a lot of perks, but there's not a lot of upward mobility. And this is what I mean by cracks in the system for you guys, Taurus. So one thing you might want to consider is, you know, you might leave a 9-to-5 to become like a fractional manager, what we talked about here, using 3 different businesses or one business of your own, to get higher pay and saying, okay, I'm going to be independent, whatever. Also, you might say, all right, I want to be a freelance contractor and I want to negotiate better deals for myself, so that if I get quietly laid off, I don't have to worry so much because I still have another stream of income. You might even start like a digital portfolio in that way. So you are using maybe AI to create your own design and market your skill sets to clients. That could be going on as well. I've seen that now. I've seen people create their own websites, which that's not new, but it's a lot easier to do now with AI. All right, guys, on to Gemini. So Gemini, this is happening in your house of higher wisdom, global system, education, travel, inspiration. It's also representing HR, law, da 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 da. What I've seen here is with Rahu right away is it actually can bring about some interesting legal situations. Not necessarily saying it'll work out or don't work out, but I'm just saying it can bring out some, you know, I got to deal with something legal going on here. I got to talk to a lawyer. I've got to talk to somebody who deals with passports, or I've got to talk to the embassy, you know, like something like that can be going on as well. I'm having conversations with HR a lot more than I would like to, you know, that can happen with this transit here. So I do want you to know that as well going on. But here we have Rahu, who wants to dismantle any frameworks or belief systems that don't really make sense anymore. Okay. So you might start distrusting frameworks that you previously believed in, that you thought were accredited, that made a lot of sense, which ideology that you followed. For example, you might have followed an ideology that was just like, okay, you get a job, you go to school, you get a job, and you retire, or something like that. And you're just like, wait a minute, I don't think that aligns with the vision of reality that's adding up. And I want to do something that actually makes sense, that will help me achieve my goals. I don't know why I say goals. Goals. Also, when it comes to expert authority and things along the lines of that, if you are already in a good place with your bosses, if you are someone who is on the inside crowd and they kind of like you and they have, taking you into meetings and they're trying to push you upward, this is actually good for that, because you can find some mobility in that area in your life. And you're like, okay, I'm getting in good with the bosses. This is leading somewhere. And that's nice for me. Sorry, my nose itches, guys. And that can be good for you in terms of that boost in recognition. This can also just feel like if you find that what you are doing is not leading you into any sort of real world power, and by power I mean like you have power over your own life, and you can live the life that you want to live. If you find that your decisions or the way that you're moving is not going in the direction you would like, because this is the house of higher thinking and seeing the big picture, you're going to shift that. You're going to say, ooh, I don't think I want to do this anymore. It feels like I'm in survival mode and I'm barely getting what I want. So I just want you to know that. Gemini wants information. Rahu wants leverage. So I'll say this, it creates a huge hunger for knowledge. It creates this desire to want to know history, to want to know about the world, to want to know how systems work, want to know what's going behind the scene, because Rahu connects to secrecy, especially Shatabhisha as well. That is also connected to the circle. It's just like, what's there? Like, what's in this circle here? I want to find out what is beyond the veil. And so this looks like diving deeper. If you have some religious beliefs, diving deeper into that. If you have anything that you would like to study, you're going to dive deeper into that, whether that's astrology, whether that is learning more about, I don't know, planes. It doesn't matter. Whatever your interest is, you're going to dive deeper into studying that. This also connects to travel. Rahu loves to travel. Though I say when we looked at Astro-Tarot through these time periods, it didn't particularly lean too heavy on travel or not travel when it came to people's lives. The focus tended to be on people having a lot more work. I will say this, because certain groups of people have more disposable income, there was, a little bit more inclination towards traveling, but I didn't see any news about having some economic boom when it comes to people going different places. So there is that, but obviously this could be aspecting something in your personal chart that makes you just want to go places and do things. So, there's just that element to it. Also, like I said, once paths that were conventional, that felt collect and liberating, you might feel stifled by them. And you might be more so like, I want to take a risk and try something completely different from me. And sometimes this can represent, I'll say this, because we saw this theme of survival and wanting to escape the system. This is almost like traveling to run away, kind of like a eat, pray, love feel to it. Like, I've just got to get out of here. Like, I've just got to move. Instead of like traveling for the love of, I want to go places and see the world. It's more so, I got to get out of here, or I'm doing this for business. Those are the vibes for my Geminis here. I'm here for work, or I'm here for getting out of here. So also I want to say, if you are studying, you're going back to school, this could be saying you're not doing that traditional degree, or maybe you're taking some interesting classes. For example, I took some AI classes, and you might be doing something like that while you're in school going on. And yes, I had an aspect from Rahu to like my 9th house while I was taking those AI classes. So there you go. That might be going on as well. You can also feel as though you want to be in a place that has laws that support you. So if you're in a country that may not have as many laws that have the certain rights that you like, you know, in America, we have those women's rights that are slowly being repealed. You may feel like, oh, I want to go to a country that actually supports my belief system and has rights. That sounds terrible, but it's true. You know, this can also be some sort of radical mindsets that's going on here for you, and you want to be in this teacher mode and teach people how to think, or even how to master the program and stop following behind. Or maybe you fall under the care of a guru, whether that's an online guru, in-person guru, whatever the case may be, and you get into this mindset of like how to beat the program and I've got to get out of here. And that's the thing that's going on with you when it comes to that 9th house energy going on there. Then we have Cancer, my lovely Cancers. Let me slide down to you guys here. This is happening in your 8th house, a house of shared resources and hidden debts. So this is also like tax, gifts, intimacy, basically any money that you got to share with somebody, or you're like, this is not mine. Like if you win the lotto, that's 8th house. If you get a settlement, that's 8th house. If you get some sort of stipend from the government, that's 8th house. These are all 8th house things. So right here we have Rahu revealing a lot of hidden things to you. So if this is not some sort of like spiritual transformation period going on, then this is going to have just a lot of wake up calls within your life. You know, areas where you might have even been emotionally dependent. You're like, oh, wait a minute. This is an aha moment for me. You actually become aware of where you might be carrying burdens for other people, or where you might be enabling other people as well. Because one thing I've noticed about Rahu, it has people pleasing tendencies, and so they can be a little bit of enablers in a way. So you might be looking in your life and like, oh, maybe I've been enabling some bad habits for other people, or maybe some people have been enabling bad habits for me, and now I'm finally seeing that. Also, you become more aware of where the risk is, because remember, we saw those crumbling of systems. And so if you're taking on like a lot of debt, and maybe you're like, oh, I'm not paying back those student loans, you start to realize the risk of that during this time period. And you're like, oh, wait a minute, maybe I should pay that back. Figure out a way, right? So you recognize some risks that are going on here. There's a lot of things going on psychologically that can be revealed to you at this time, whether that's you going into therapy. And then, like I said, you could be diving deeper into intimacy. A lot of people, when they have 8th house transits, find themselves being more open and vulnerable to others. I will say this, though. Rahu is a planet that, or a figure that is more so outwardly oriented, but it is in Shatabhisha. And so Shatabhisha, since it's Rahu's highest rule placement, it's more likely to do a little bit more self-reflection and shadow work rather than Ardra or Swati. So we'll have that going on for you, but I wouldn't say it's the most psychologically deep placement. One thing that I see Rahuvian people struggle with is they struggle with knowing themselves, whether that's Ardra, whether that's Shatabhisha, whether that is Swati. But like I said, Shatabhisha will do a little bit more internal work with trying to figure out who they are, what they like, what makes them happy, etc. This can also be a placement where you find that you want to give back to people a lot more. I know we always talk about the 8th house being like you leaning on other people for resources, but what I have found here is Rahu's more of a giver than a receiver. And so you might actually be giving a little more to people, but there is an opportunity for people to be sharing resources with you as well, especially if you build your circle. This can also be a great time to negotiate higher pay for yourself, cutting cords with things that drain you and your vitality. I'm focusing a lot on the resources because, like I said, Shatabhisha Rahu is very material oriented in that way. So this is like a boost in, if you have stocks, a boost in investments, boosting your 401k, or you have these things like you start to see cracks where you're like, oh, maybe I need to change my investments around a little bit. I need to shift this, and this doesn't look right for me. This doesn't seem like my finances are growing in the way that I want them to grow. So I'm going to destructure that and restructure it so that I can keep up with the pace of inflation. So you want to eliminate exposure and liabilities at this time. This is about outcoming survival mode. So this can also look at hidden emotions or feelings, especially as it relates to resources or even any personal matters in your life. It's a bit about like cleaning house, whether that be emotionally, financially, having to deal with other people in that way. And you're looking at your relationship to other people and looking where these risks are, or family debts that are going on in your life. So that is going on. You can also sort of freelance for money. That can be a thing, helping people. As I said, looking at your retirement funds. As I said, Rahu is more future oriented. So I would be surprised if you didn't look towards retirement investments or planning for trust or estate planning or end of life planning, will planning. All of these things you can look at. I know the 8th house connects to death, but sometimes it's preparation for death, you know? One thing, because I do a lot of research when it comes to like money, finances, at least I've started doing that, that I've noticed is Rahuvian people tend to plan a lot better when it comes to end of life planning. So this is what I say, that you might start looking at life insurance and all of these things when Rahu is in this house. Here, and especially in Shatabhisha, you start recognizing, oh, wait a minute, you know, life is not going to always be on the up and up. It's really not, you know. So I do want to say that, but this can also represent access to information you didn't have before when it came to wealth, money, and investment and growing structures. In that way, sorry, my nose, I don't know why it's bothering me. So some things people might do is they move their savings into hard assets like gold or land, if you have enough money for that, or even just property. You can offer, like, let's say you give advice on trauma and wealth and helping people. Like the theme can be helping people, bringing confidence back within yourself as well. Trying to figure out how other people influence you. That's something you could be looking at when it comes to that. Let's move on to Leo here. Oh, skipped a little thing here. So Leo, this is happening in your house of partnerships, and this is going into contracts. 7th house is also one-on-one relationships. Doesn't necessarily have to be a romantic one. It could be a relationship you have with your boss, anybody you work closely with, or you might see on a regular basis, or at least 3 or 4 times a week, maybe even 2 times a week, depending on how frequently you see them, or how, like, if you spend 2 times a week with someone for like 10 hours straight, that's, you know, I would say that's a one-on-one relationship there. So these are the things that it can connect to here. And so just looking at that. Also, this can represent legal matters as well with the 7th house. Remember, it does connect to Libra, justice, and all of that jazz. And marketing, putting yourself out there. It's the house of the public. It is the house of being seen in a way, because it's the house of other people. So when Rahu moves here into the 7th house, so what it does is it makes you highly aware of who you have access to, who influences you. It brings more visibility or even more resources in your life through other people. And the resources may not necessarily be money, what I have noticed sometimes is Rahu can bring resources in terms of information. So you might meet people who can really provide you some guidance when it comes to a certain area of your life that you might find struggle with, or you just need to know information on. For example, let's say you're someone who has maybe struggled with your weight and your diet. During this transit, you might meet a dietitian who provides you very solid advice, strong information, and you may work with them one-on-one to help you with that. There's something like that. Financial advisor. This could be someone you work with during this time period. So having more access to certain resources. And not only that, because like I said, this is Shatabhisha, this is the circle. This is not necessarily well-known knowledge that everybody knows. And this is, you know, you're just being revealed to it. You're just now having it revealed to you. No, this is something that you might have to have digged for, or was a little bit more selective in a sense. Also, in a way, said, yes, that would be good. I hope that happens for you, Mona, you know, at this time, especially when it comes to your job. Hopefully you can find someone who has expertise, because I know you were looking to have someone help you scale in your business. So I am definitely fingers crossed for you with that. This is a perfect time to meet someone for that. Also, you know, you might be drawn to people who want to give back to their communities in a way. Like I said, Rahu is a placement that's a little bit of a giver here. And so even if they can be kind of, what's the word? They're known for being very cold, or, you know, kind of like a little mean in a way, Rahuvian people. But what happens is they're still like, they'll still give things to you. You know, they're when I was doing a study on like people who were the most charitable, or people who were more than likely to give to people, wish fulfillment, a lot of the placements I came up were Rahuvian placements. And so, you know, when you have this going through your 7th house, let's say you're looking for someone who's a contractor for your home, they are more inclined to give you a deal at this time. So I just want to say that they're more likely to say, okay, like, you know, I'll do this for this price at this time, and negotiate with you. So that can happen with this placement with Shatabhisha going on here as well. I was voluntary ×5 since Thanksgiving. I love charity work. I love that. I love that you are invested in charity work and giving your time and energy to other people as well. Everyone should be very charitable. Everyone should give back in some way. If you cannot give time, maybe give resources. If you can't give resources, give any information you can have. You'd be surprised how much you know. I mean, I'm going into charity right now, guys. But essentially, you know, when we talk about this time period in your life, if you're not forming relationships with people, because as we talked about with this Shatabhisha transit, this can definitely bring about those communities of like-minded people, or people who understand you a little bit more, people who can be a little bit more quirky or out there or innovative, or people who just sort of understand you in some way. This is a perfect time for that. And as we saw with the SAP program, with the women forming their cohorts, this is kind of cohorts, their communities, especially when it came to a little bit of financial empowerment. We can see that being done a little bit with certain partnerships, that you may feel more empowered through the partnerships that you form. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be financial all the time. You just feel like they provide me something, I provide them something. It feels like we are working together, and this feels like a mutually beneficial relationship going on here. Once again, you may be a little bit more selective about who you spend your time and energy with going on in this manner. What else can happen here? You know, you might even find that you are meeting people from environments that are just a lot different than you. Like they grew up in a different upbringing, a different class, a different race, background. This happens a lot more when we have these placements, especially with Shatabhisha. You'll meet people who are, they just may have how do I say this? They just have different experiences than you. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they don't understand the way you think or how you do things. I have found this transit to be rather pleasant, at least from what I've seen. You know, it can bring a little chaos here, like I said, when it comes to legal matters and whatnot, but it's definitely going to get you out of a situation career-wise, similar to how this went through the 10th house, because the 7th house is 10th from the 10th. If you're in an environment there where it's stagnant, there's no growth, you're not changing, there's no transformation, you know, there may be something happening here where Rahu's like, we got to get you out of here. Like, I'm sorry. This is a wrap that can be going on here. One thing, because we saw with the dating services, remember guys, we saw that things were being filtered through meeting friends, going through apps, going through matchmaking. If you meet someone, more than likely this is not going through a one-on-one service. This is some being filtered through something. Like I said, maybe you find that you meet someone through an app. Maybe you meet someone by going through a dating event. Maybe you meet someone through a friend, but it's not likely that you will just randomly meet someone in the wild. You know, we have that screening process when it comes to Rahu. You've got to get through X, Y, and Z thing, and then I can talk to you, and then da-da-da, right? So that can be happening if you meet someone romantically at this time. You may also find yourself in a situation where you're mediating for people, just kind of in between space, and you have to be this mediator person. That can happen as well. Or even you could be the person who's bringing people together and playing matchmaker at this time. Though I get that a little bit more for Mars rule placements, but it can happen. It can happen with a little Astro-Tarot thing going on there. And then also you might find that you are learning more about yourself through others and what matters to you, and how you think about your ethics. That's something that's a part of this story as well, that we don't hear too much when it comes to this placement. But you want to be in contracts where you can be a little bit more independent. All right, Virgo, let's get on here. Let's get to you. Virgo, this is going through your 6th house, right? So this is the house of work, health, and daily operations going on here. Pets, rentals. It's even the house that people say it represents dating, you know, because it comes right before the 7th house. So you kind of have to date before you get married, right? And I think that adds up, because when I was doing my study, right, we have the 2 placements that rule marriage and coming together, and that is Purva Falguni, which is in Leo, and we have Uttara Falguni, which is in Leo and Virgo. And so we have these elements of dating when it comes to the sign of Virgo. So you could be doing a little bit more dating here. Rahuvian placement is going to bring you a span of different people. It's going to be diverse, very diverse in a way, but it's actually interesting. Even though it's diverse, you could find yourself in a Cinderella situation where you might be weirdly selective. Like you broadcast your hopes and wishes and what you're looking for in a partner to someone, and they may have all these qualities, but they come from a background that's totally different from yours. So that is what I mean by diverse. Like they have the things that you want, but it's like, oh, wait a minute, but you're not exactly what I was thinking. Also, what I see with the Rahuvian placements is, like I said, you could be with people in your work environment who are, how do I say, there's some distance between you. There's a little bit of distance between you there. Remember, Aquarius does connect to distance between people. Remember that circle, that distancing going on there. And so what this can look like is work from home for some of you. And this can also look like just feeling as though your co-workers, there's a little bit of emotional distance there. Like you may not as bond to the same type of level unless there's that physical distance. You know, if that makes sense. What happens here is that we expose inefficiencies within your work life here. Things that don't make sense crumble, and this can also be your routine life. For example, if you're someone who has been eating cheese and you're like, oh my goodness, why I'm getting bloated, and you know, why is my stomach hurting? And this is for people who can't handle cheese, right? And then you finally start doing testing and switching out your foods, and you realize it's the cheese that's making you bloated, and it's the cheese that's causing your skin to break out, and da 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 da. This is where you're like, oh, I've got to drop this. I've got to leave this behind. This is not for me. I've got to end it. For example, if you're somebody who has anxiety and you're drinking things like coffee and you're just like, oh wow, this is actually causing my anxiety to trigger, and I've got to do something here because it's gotten to a point where it's bad. Like it's really bad here, and I don't think I can handle this. So that's something that can happen when we talk about this placement and things that are being disrupted and falling apart and getting out of there. And yeah, you want to be selective about how you give your time and energy and your body into the systems that you are putting yourself into when it comes to work, and even you might want to move. I just want to say that because Rahu going through the 6th house wants to make you want to move a little bit. But also I want to say you want to put some stability when it comes, not stability, definitely not stability. You want to make some changes in your life when it comes to those areas of your body, your nutrition, and all of that jazz. Rahu, you know, part of your daily life could be that you are putting your stuff on social media, because like I said, we talked about that independent architect, and the best way to be an independent architect in this day and age is to essentially market yourself. And so that could be part of your daily grind a lot more, where you're posting, you're vlogging, you're posting on Instagram, you are chatting, you know, you become a talker on social media, you're a yapper. And that becomes part of your daily routine to build more autonomy for yourself and build more independence for yourself when we talk about here. But the goal here is having mastery over your daily system so that they serve you and not the institution that built them, right? We don't want that at all. You might even feel a little bit confined by your work environment. So what this looks like is like you could be fixing your health, like I said, from the ground up, your daily routine. You're like, I got to get my rest somehow. Granted, I will say Rahu is not K2. K2 would, you know, if this was going through your 6th house, I would say you're sleeping. But Rahu, that triple, double down effect, you actually might not be sleeping a lot, my little Virgos, which I don't think that's new for you. It's about, you know, using the technology you have to get yourself back on schedule. That is one way to do it. There's definitely apps that can help you set a schedule, time things. There's all sorts of technology out there that can help you with things like that. But you're kind of refusing to be that cog in the machine. You want to make a name for yourself. And definitely when you have Rahu in the 6th house, you do make a little bit of a name for yourself within your environment, your coworkers, and all of that. Also, when we have this, we have an expansion of, you know, wanting to put things in your house. You know, you're just like, I want some lavish things. I want some nice things in my home. And that could be a nice pet, you know, it could be an unusual pet, or maybe you just give your pet an exotic name or whatever the case may be. That could be going on. And then sometimes this is like moving to the area where you might be a minority, just because, like I said, it represents rentals. And so that can be happening as well for you. Rahuvian energy, especially in Shatabhisha, very picky about what they put into their bodies. And so you may find yourself digging for information. Remember, I said Shatabhisha has this quality where it unveils things, it looks for hidden things. So you're looking up those nutritional facts, and you might get a little bit picky about what you decide to eat, what you put in your body. And that could play a role in how you change things in that way. Be on the lookout for any what do I want to call it? Conspiracy theorist information that can come about when it comes to health and everything. This also represents wanting the more alternative medicine rather than traditional medicine here. You might be more experimental. But it really does depend on what planet is aspecting it. Because if it's with Mercury, you might be a little bit more careful. But if it's with a planet that's kind of like Jupiter, you might just say, heck, let me try the Ozempic pill. You know what I mean? So, you know, that's the vibes here. Be careful of burnout. Be careful of that, because remember, we talked about that survival energy. Remember when we were talking about India in the 80s, and we talked about this upward trend in 2007. We talked about India and the IT and the working the long hours and the building of the middle class. So Rahu's energy is obviously want to work long hours. And remember, even when we were talking about the dating segment for both eras and different time periods, people were saying that they were limited on time. It didn't feel like they had time to date. And that became part of the reason why they had to go through these middlemen, right? So be careful about burnout in your routine and running out of time to do things and having a million ideas and a million things on your plate. And I know you want to tackle it all. And Rahu's like this godlike figure that wants to do everything, but you can't do everything, Virgo. Okay, so you've got to have to slow down. This can also represent some sort of fractional work as well, where you want to work part-time, or you have like smaller tasks, or even just if it's not like smaller tasks, you're breaking up projects and maybe you have more mini projects and you're using AI within your office, or even like you're saying, okay, I just work from home 2 days a week, or I work in the office 2 days a week. Libra, we are finally on to you, your 5th house. Let's get into it. So if you guys are still with me, I may have to take a break in a bit, guys, because I think I may have to use the restroom. Actually, let's pause on Libra. I'm going to use the restroom and I'm going to be right back. And I love that I don't have to say pause on Libra, you know, because you can see it highlighted. So let me take this break and I will be right back with you guys. We've been on for almost 2 hours. I did not think it would be this long. I'm sorry. But it's a very informative video and I hope you guys like it. And you can go back and check in your signs. And I'm definitely going to try to summarize this for you guys. So be right back. right, guys. All right. I am back. Just want to check on the stream. So if you guys are coming in, I am going through Rahu and Shatabhisha right now. And I am essentially just talking about everything that is happening in the world of this transit. And we're going to go through all the signs and everything that's going on. So, all right. I'm just checking to see if you can still hear me. Test. Okay, so Mona says perfect timing. So we should be good in terms of sound. Because I don't want to be like, oh, I was talking this whole time and then no one heard me. So let's get back to Libra here. So Libra, this is happening in the 5th house of creativity, speculation, and children. And so when Rahu is here, there is this appetite and way for creation, right? It's about self-expression. You said your husband is a Libra. Is that in Vedic astrology? So, wow, that is, he must be very peaceful, you know. I like Libra. They're very agreeable generally. Sometimes they're stubborn. But it's creation, pleasure, self-expression that leads to something tangible, you know. I have found when we're talking about Rahu going in Shatabhisha, it can represent wanting to, how do I say it? You can want to have a great time. You can want to have more fun. You can want to have more enjoyment in your life. You can want more free time for yourself. This is like Rahu going into its rebellious era where it's like, I don't want to be responsible anymore. I kind of want to go off and do my own thing. And that's not to say you won't have responsibilities, but it's less so craving that approval because it's not in its normal place. Rahu is normally in the sign of Aquarius, the opposite placement of 11th house and hopes and wishes. And this house is all about your commitments and obligations to other people. And so maybe they want to do a little bit of group activity. Maybe not so much. It really depends on the mood when we have this placement, just because it's so much like opposite of itself, you know? So there is this sort of wavy like nature to who they want to spend time with, or do they want to spend time alone, or do they want to be with a bunch of people? It can be up and down in that way sometimes. But one thing here we have is some experimentation, especially when it comes to the things that they want to do. Remember how I mentioned that independent architect? So Rahu in the 5th house can want to bring about some unusual experiences here. So for example, they might say, all right, I've always wanted to hold a baby tiger, right? And they just go find a zoo where they can hold a baby tiger. Like, it's just something like a random, unique experience that's fun, that's a little bit different, okay? So that is something that can happen here when we talk about this. This can also just sort of want to break you out of your shell a bit and get you into a different space. Sometimes I've seen this placement, depending on where somebody is in life, if they're in a place where they're in a position of, let's say they have a lot of wealth, they have a lot of stability, then they might want to do something that's a little bit more like, let me rough it, you know, let me do something that is perceived as, I don't know, lower, maybe not lower class, but it's not perceived as upper class. So they're like, maybe I want to go to a monster truck show. Or maybe I want to go to a race car rally, you know, like F1 might be a upper class race car rally, but just a regular one, not particularly perceived as upper class, but this is what I'm talking about. Now, if there's somebody who is from a background that is less financially well off, then it'll be sort of like the opposite feel where they're saying, okay, I want to go to more luxury environments. I want to be in a space where people are doing like really cool things that are exclusive. And I want to go to a fashion show and I want to figure out how to do that. Like that becomes like the mindset. How can I infiltrate the elite circles? You know, that's what happens with Shatabhisha. Like I want to wear this disguise and be someone I'm not. And it can go both ways. Like I said, whether that's them disguising themselves as like I'm one of the commoners, or I'm disguising myself as I am someone who is, you know, one of the upper echelons. So that can happen here, but just in a creative way, meaning like they're doing it. They're doing something that is not traditionally associated with somebody of their class or background, but they're doing something fun. This can also represent a boost in creativity as well. I think I said that, or even wanting to date more if you're single. If you have a spouse, you know, you might want to go out with them. You might want to try some new things. You might want to break up the flow. Somehow that can happen as well. If like you're an artist, you might say, I want to get my own gallery. You know, I want to release my own video game. I want to create my own digital story online. I want to run my own business. I want to expand my business. I want to grow it. I want to figure out how I can market to people. I want to figure out how I can reach more customers, because the 5th house represents business. Rahu represents expansion. These are all of the things. Remember how I talked about all of those things when it comes to dating and romance. Yes, this is all about meeting people through that middleman experience. I'm meeting through a friend. I'm meeting through a family. You have to have that introduction there. When we talk about Rahu and Shatabhisha, this is going on here. I've seen people who have Rahu go through their 5th house, and that Rahu energy, generally they met people through dating apps. So that was the primary source in which they had their middleman story going on there. We have this energy here where you are wanting to either, I didn't mean to do that. What was that? We want to move away from gatekeepers, or even move towards them. Like I said, 5th house is a little bit different. Something that can happen is you launch your own brand, or you launch a certain product. This can also represent that you are going into new spaces and places and just vibing out. And sometimes this is an expansion of free time, which sometimes can look like unemployment. That can happen as well with this, particularly. And what we see here is that sometimes you're doing a lot of selling, because Rahu is that salesmanship energy, and you might find yourself in a position where you have to sell something of yours, whether that's just a normal yard sale, or whether you're just like I said, you're starting your own business, you're doing your own thing in that area. You could become a consultant in something creative as well. That's well within the realm of possibility. Trying to think of what I've seen with this transit here. I have generally found this transit to essentially wanting to explore and go in different areas. Like sometimes people get in this rut where they go to work and they go home. Then they have Rahu go through their 5th house, and they break away from what they know, and they decide, oh, wow, like there's a whole big bright world out there that I didn't get to see before. And that's something that I want to invest my time and energy into. And then, yeah, definitely social media can become a thing. During your free time, you could be utilizing, like I said, all of that technology and growth to build an online presence. That's something that can happen with Rahu in the 5th house as well. But I will say this, because K2 will be opposite and in the 11th house, you're less performative. Like it's a little bit more real rather than aesthetically pleasing for everyone or following trends as much. So there is that going on. You're kind of like, I want to do my own thing. I have my own style. I have my own flavor. You're leaning more into the creative trendsetter aspect of this transit that could be going on with this. Now, Scorpio, we have this going through your 4th house of home, land, family, and roots. So this can represent one of two things. Either one is destabilizing any sense of false security or emotional safety that you have. You know, you might feel all fine and dandy. You might think everything is great. You've gone to therapy, you've done the work, and then something comes and torpedoes your life and you are triggered and you are a mess and you're like, oh man, I've got to figure this out. Like, I've got to learn how to emotionally regulate through situations that are constantly triggering. That can happen. Remember, we talked about the cracks forming and lots of instability going around when we had that Shatabhisha happening here. Happy New Year to you, Darren, to you and everyone online. And nice listening to you, Down to Earth Lady. I'm Cancer from New Zealand. Hey, thanks for listening. And I mean, I love a Cancer, so gotta love the water signs, guys. But speaking of water signs, back to Scorpio, guys. And so what can happen here is that you may have to do some more internal work where you are looking to find a way to build stability for yourself, whether that is physical stability or emotional stability. Rahu and Shatabhisha can have you looking for a new environment or a new home, a place to stay that is going to provide you something better. And that is something that you'll see here. There may be a little bit of like idealization of fantasy and, you know, but I do think by the end of this transit, you'll be able to face like the reality and say, okay, this is what I can work with. Like realistically, if you're trying to move, you might say, okay, I want a place that is by the beach, that's cheap, affordable, and I don't have to commute. And you think about all of these things that you want within a home. And then by the end of this transit, you're just like, all right, well, this is good enough. And it's still a nice place and it's a new environment. And I like this a lot better. And it's in the direction that I want to go in. Because remember, Rahu's that future karma. It's that place you want to travel to. And you're just like, this is good. This is better. This is an improvement. I'm finding my way out of it. For some people, this can represent more independence. If they lived with a roommate or if they lived with family or friends before, this is like, I'm going out and I'm living on my own and I'm sustaining myself. It's me. It's all me. Also, we have here, like I said, checking any emotional, psychological triggers and finding more stability in that way and learning to self-regulate, diving deeper within yourself. One thing we see here is learning more about history and having things revealed to you that you didn't know about your family, for sure. Like you are going to know a lot more things about your family. Maybe you learn more about your parents' upbringing. Maybe you learn more about your grandparents and their lives and the things that they experienced. I've seen people who have Rahu go through the fourth house and they learned a lot more about different health issues or mental illnesses with family members and learn about like their parents' childhoods and all of this jazz. I want to say that that Shatabhisha, you'll see a lot of them be really into history. More so than any other Rahuvian placement. So when you have Rahu and Shatabhisha and it's lining up and also in its sign in an Navamsha, you're really digging deep when it comes to the history of your family. So I do want to say that you're going to know, and if it's not your family, it could be your homeland. You just might just want to know more about American history or not American history, not assuming everyone's American. If you are Darren and you're from New Zealand, you might want to know more about New Zealand's history. So that could happen too. Like if you were somebody who was a Scorpio, sun, moon, or rising. So these are the things that can happen. What it looks like is you're trying to make your home more secure and I don't want to say that you're moving away from city life because, like I said, Rahu can push you a little bit more towards urban environments. And so actually you might be more interested in being in a city center or closer to it. Rahu wants to be around the people in a way. It's like, I want to be where the money resides. And so, that's usually going to be the urban centers. The more further out, the more rural things are, the less opportunities there are for material gains. And so that is not what Rahu wants to do at all. So you might actually feel like, ooh, I actually kind of want to go towards the city a little bit more if you're a little bit further out. You actually may feel as though you want a more lavish environment. You might make some tweaks to your environment as well. Your apartment, your home, these are all things that can be renovated. Remember how I talked about earlier when we talked about 2025, we have this shadow banking economy and a lot of people are refinancing. If this is Rahu and Shatabhisha in your fourth house, you actually could be refinancing your home at this time as well. You might be one of those people, and also I should have said this for Libra, you might be refinancing your business, you know, if you own one. So there is that aspect to it. But essentially, you might be a little nostalgic. You're going through the family archives, going through family old photos. This might be a time for reunions. You might even just find that you're spending more time with family, just being honest. Like I know somebody who had Rahu go through their fourth house and they had this whole thing where their family gathered together for their grandparents' birthday, where everyone came out from all over. So it's not really like a normal occasion. They don't normally do that. So just a whole big occasion when it comes to that. Generally, you will not be resting at home. I want to say that. Remember, we talked about all of that hustle, that grind, that So you're bringing that into your home environment. So you're a little bit restless at home. That is going on there. You could be working at home like me. I'm at home. I'm working here. We've been on for 2 hours and 30 minutes. So I got to wrap this up. But yeah, you could find yourself working at home a lot more here. And wanting to design your dream space. Like I said, this is more aspirational and say, I want a nice space for myself and having a lot of hopes and wishes in that area. Okay, on to my beautiful Sagittariuses. We're almost done, guys. So Sagittarius, the focus in your third house, skills, communication, daily logistics. I'm driving places. I'm going to the mall. I'm going to get gas and put it in my car, all of that jazz. Oh, and businesses as well. And also, since it's the second from the second, this also represents a money house. So I just want to say that transits to your third house affect your money as well. So, which makes sense because it's the house of skills. So if you gain more skills, you can get more money generally. So what happens here is Rahu is going to shape your voice and also your mind. Your third house represents what's going on in your brain here. So what happens is you get flooded with ideas. Like it is nonstop. It's very restless energy, especially with Rahu and Shatabhisha. You want to be somebody who is an innovative force. You want to do things different. You want to have skills that are futuristic, you know what I mean? You want to anticipate growth. And so something like that could be, for example, I do things in project management. So looking up things in AI and tech as it relates to project management and knowing how to handle those projects could be something related to this. But just having skills that you feel like are going to be needed in the future. If you want to be somebody who is an overseer of AI marketing, then you start looking for skills in that area and how you can grow in that area and how you can develop, or even just start using those skills yourself and start implementing them. And there's already a lot of different systems and structures and methodologies when it comes to how people work with these tools. Not saying anything's set in stone, but you have a lot of people who are discussing these ideas, and you might start listening to podcasts when it comes to professionals, because remember how I said that Rahu in Shatabhisha, how it was protecting the elites and how it was focusing on the upper echelons and the people who are already benefiting. So what this does here, because Rahu is that person who mirrors, who is pretending to be someone they're not, or the illusionist. The story of Rahu is like a demon who pretended to be a god. So what this does is you may start actually imitating people who are successful. You might start listening to podcasts of people who are where you want to be. You start doing what they do. You start moving how they move. You start thinking how they think. You read the books that they read. Like, this is what it does. It's like, I want to mirror your success. And in this way, you can boost money as well. Like I said, this is a money house. It all comes together, guys. So you're gaining those skills, you're figuring out ways to advertise yourself, and you are gaining more money, more leverage. also it can give you pretty radical opinions and ideas as well. And just look for ways that you can monetize yourself rather than stay in one role. Like here, one role, please. You've got multiple skills, you've got multiple talents, you're doing multiple things. You're going to want to be more independent. You're going to want to have your own business. You're going to want to have a side hustle. This third house placement and the fifth house placement, both of these placements here are going to say, I really want that independence. I really want to be that architect. I really want to use social media in different ways and different tools and systems to grow and be more independent. And also because this is the house of bravery, this is definitely amplifying that. You're taking more risks. You're taking more chances. You're doing more dumb things with your money. And dumb is sometimes good, right? Because if you don't take that risk, you don't take that chance, you'll never know what happens, right? This is like, I've invested $5,000 in Bitcoin, 10 grand in Bitcoin, like big, bold moves here when we talk about this placement going on. So what I said this looks like before, you're breaking your talents into pieces and you're selling it to people. You might want to freelance, you want to be a contractor. You definitely want to be your own boss here for sure. This also can give you a way of thinking that is not oriented towards the present day. You're thinking 5, 6, 7 steps ahead, and it may not always be appreciated at once. And like I said, it's very aspirational in a sense. But it does set a precedent. You know, there's definitely going to be people who see what you do and think, oh, that's a little bit different. You know, that's something I didn't expect, or surprising, or it's good, or something like that. It takes people off guard, your ideas and how you communicate and how you structure yourself and the skills that you may have and your talents that you may have, right? So that's something that can be going on there as well. Even if you don't fully get to monetize yourself in the way that you would like, or get the money that you would like in this time period, which Rahu in the third house, it can go either way. It really does depend on other planets here. But I will say this, because it is in a technical money house, it's more likely to bring money than not bring money. But it's going to be through means that aren't necessarily following the current system. So here you're moving away from job hugging and you're moving towards something that is on your own schedule. Remember, we talked about this being like your daily logistics. Well, here you want to set your own schedule for yourself. So you are like determined to do that. And even during this time period, if you find that you have to take on some sort of traditional role, 9 to 5, you may be a little bit in and out of that. You know, I'm going to be honest, because this placement just absolutely hates that. So you might find yourself taking more vacations in a way and just saying, peace out, guys. I don't want to do this. This is not for me at all. Definitely bringing your own unique voice and personality out there in the world, discovering more about who you are, expanding your mind, learning more skills, more talents, more communication. Like, for example, I learned how to do this little sidebar panel, and I learned that last night. It took just an hour, guys, maybe 2 hours. Took 2 hours. So, you know, you learn new skills, you learn new things, and you do it a lot more with this placement, Sagittarius. So your big brains, you guys are already pretty smart, are expanding even more, and you're looking into more technical skills as well. This can also represent meeting more people, talking to more people, people who are experts, people who have, definitely it's going to bring you around circles of people who have a little bit more wealth. There's more haves than have-nots with this particular placement. I want to say that because, like I said, it's sort of a money house, so it's attracting more wealth. And that's what Rahu likes to do. So you will kind of be around people who have a little bit more wealth, have a little bit more stability, have a little bit more accolades, have a little bit more success, people who are seen as traditionally impressive, you know. So I just want to say that. But at the same time, because you're a Sagittarius rising and you guys like to think pretty deeply, you actually might find this not to be as enjoyable, just because when I notice with the Sagittarius rising, you guys kind of like a little bit more authenticity, And Rahu, like you said, it's the illusionist, and they don't kind of like reveal themselves to everyone. And so that part might be a little bit like, oh, I feel like I'm meeting people who are very like standoffish, or they're putting on a little facade, or they're very well mannered and they're kind and they're nice, but I want to see that rawness. Sagittarius likes that. So I'll say that's one thing I noticed about this placement here. Also, this is representative of the content you consume. And so you're going to be looking towards people who are more innovators. And you're not going to be into that traditional media. You're not going to sit around and watch TV. Capricorn, let's get to you. Okay, so Cappies. This is going through your second house of money, personal assets, all of that jazz. So definitely not minimalism. This is an aspirational placement. Think about Rahu. Rahu is a place that you want, you desire, you want more of. Big, better, more. Big, better, more. And so when we think about big, better, more, and we think about the situations of the financial crises of 2007, 2008, when things start to hit, well, people definitely wanted big, better, more for themselves. So I would say be careful about this placement, because actually you might take on more than you bargained for, or you may have these hopes and wishes for things and desires for material gains in your life. And you might feel like this comes at too big of a price. We had all those defaults and the system going down, and we had all of these innovative ideas and changes when it came to money and all of that jazz. And it didn't necessarily work out all the time, right? And so I just want to say be careful in that area. But yeah, this can bring a little bit more wealth to you. If you've already been doing pretty good in your career and you've been looking for a boost or something like that, would be the time period for it. I will say this. Let me say this. If you are someone who has been looking to climb up the ladder, if you've been looking to grind and make your way to the top, you're definitely going to have to do what I said when I said be your own independent architect. Because with this type of placement, it's kind of like being in the 10th house. How I was saying there's a lot of pushback from people in leadership about certain ideas that you might have. And so they don't truly value your thought process. They're going to be a little bit more stagnant. They're going to be a little bit more slow, especially if you're within a traditional system. If you're not within a traditional system, you actually would do pretty well. But ultimately, I say the best advice here when you have Rahu in the second house like this, fall into that line of that independent architect. Literally, you've got to try to do your own thing. You've got to try to advertise yourself. You got to try to push towards something innovative that's going to make you grow. Otherwise, you might find things to be a little bit stagnant or rocky. Don't job hug here. Move on. Take a risk. Take a chance. Other ways this can represent making money is means in terms of, it can be traditional but non-traditional. And what I mean by that is you can invest in the stock market. I've seen just a lot of Rahuvian people, especially with Shatabhisha placements, just because it's Aquarius, and Aquarius rules the stock market. A lot of Shatabhisha people can create a lot of wealth through stock market. So you might be spending your money investing in that area of life, or just some sort of investment. It could be real estate, doesn't matter. But ultimately, this can represent just investing in something that could bring you money, especially if it's related to something a little bit more innovative. Like I said, tech stocks, or there might be some sort of innovative way to do real estate. I think they have those real estate stocks as well. They have sites for it where they have groups of people and they invest in a property, and then they get a percentage back every month or every quarter or something like that. So it's like residual income and something like that. But that's a less traditional way, but also a traditional way. This is why I said traditional, non-traditional could be going on as well, depending on what planet you have in your second house here. But you will want more for yourself. You want that upheaval, you want that transformation, you want that money coming in, and you're going to try to aim for it. The best way to do so is to create a plan with Shatabhisha, and that applies to every area, but sometimes people get caught up in just having the aspiration and they don't think about the steps that go with creating the plan. Create the plan and you'll find a lot more success this time. Go book by book, go day by day, figure out what you're doing, your daily steps to hit that goal. You could be looking up more information when it comes to creating wealth. Similar to the 4th house transit, you can have some things revealed about family as well. Second house also can connect to relationships. I've just found a lot of second house transits where people get married, they find the love of their lives, they settle down. That could be a thing for you. And it could feel as though you've met someone who is a little bit different, I'll say that. But ultimately, because we saw that people dated within they aspired for something amazing and transformative, and they said, I want the partner with six foot with abs and who's a millionaire, but they ended up with someone who's very similar to themselves. So that actually might happen here. You might have these aspirations of I want this, and this person, but you end up with someone who's very similar to you, social economically, in terms of, looks, in terms of, like I said, money and age range, it lines up for most people. This is the time in which you could, similar to the 3rd house, 5th house, start selling things. You want to create that business. If not selling things, one thing that I will see is Rahu rules hidden things. And so what happens is you might actually start hiding your money a little bit more. And what I mean by that is you might have some in this bank, some in that bank, some in this investment portfolio, some in that investment portfolio. And it's kind of like creating these different safety nets because you see cracks in the system. One crack within the system is, I don't think it might have been Bank of America, but somebody had this whole thing last year where they had people couldn't access their money. Like they couldn't access their money. Their accounts were froze for a couple of days. And so you might start see something like that happen. And you're just like, you know what? I've got to split my money up into different banks. Sometimes banks will close down your accounts and you see those cracks and you're like, okay, I don't want to deal with that. So I want to have this separate bank account here. And so that's something that Rahu can do in the 2nd house. Other things that we can talk about here is generally it's going to, I don't know if it doesn't necessarily make you want to start a family, but you can. That's why I said 2nd house transits, they all kind of like can bring somebody into your life. But Rahu doesn't necessarily say, I want that family, unless it's tied to some sort of status. And then the desire grows. It's actually interesting because Shatabhisha can be quite lonely, but they can be quite particular about who they want. That symbol of the empty circle again coming up and having certain people close to them and all of that. But also very generous. So you might be generous with your resources here as well as you might find other people generous with you. And if it's not resources, time, energy, these are all of the things that happen. You're no longer going to, what's the word? You're looking for ways to sustain yourself when it comes to food that is going to be very much like you like expensive things. Like, let me just say it. Rahu in the 2nd house, you like $100 dinner, you like a $200 meal. Like that can happen with this placement. And so you might find that you're spending your money on things that are high quality because it feels better for you. So that is what I want to say. Moving on. We are in Aquarius, and thank you guys for watching my live here. I did not think it would be this long, but this is the last astrology video I'll do for a minute. We have Aries in the 1st house, your house of self-identity, new beginnings, all of that jazz. Not Aries, we have Aquarius 1st house. I don't know why I said Aries. We have this full-scale reinvention when we talk about Rahu going in the 1st house. So Rahu going into the 1st house can bring you a little bit of an identity crisis going on here. And you might feel like, number one, you're either in hustle mode, survival mode. You've got to make things change. You got to make things happen. You got to do things now. So you might be in this place where you've got to grind. Also, you might even just feel a little bit like an outsider with this placement here as well. And you're going to want to look to communities to help you, to bring about some stability within your life, to bring about a little bit less of loneliness, but it might be a little bit hard to find here because it feels as though everyone's in grind mode, or they're in their own world, or they're not really paying attention to your needs and all of this jazz, and that can happen as well. But one thing I'll say this here is that it can definitely make you polarizing, but in a good way, but also visible. Like I said, this placement, this Rahuvian thing becomes who you are. So I've seen people who have this Rahu in their first house natally, and they very much stand out. Even if they don't physically stand out, once you start talking to them, it's like they're very quirky. They are very silly. They can be people who are what's the word? Very innovative. Lots of ideas, interesting philosophies, interesting perspective on the world. They are very much like, I don't know if I say unapologetic for who they are. They're very apologetic for who they are. So this is why I say it can sort of create a little bit of identity crisis and a little bit of insecurity, because you feel like you want to fit into this narrative, this space. You want to be one of those people within the circle, but it just feels like you're coming up against a lot of pushback against who you are. And that can happen like this. So you might go through this phase of reinvention, and maybe you want to look the part to get the job. One thing I've seen with Rahuvian people is like some of them, a lot of them will work in luxury, and not even just work in luxury. This is like a story I've seen of Rahuvian people. They might get self-conscious about the way they speak, right? They grow up in an environment, and they're very much a product of their environment. And so maybe they have a Southern accent, or they maybe have a Long Island accent, whatever the case may be. They go into the corporate world, they're very smart, but they don't sound like everyone. They don't look like everyone. That's something that comes. And I will see Rahuvian people change the way they speak. And so during this time period, you can experiment with a lot of the way that you look, the way you talk, the way you present yourself. All of these things might undergo transformations so that you can achieve more success, because this can be sometimes a little bit like, I want to blend in so I can get to where I want to go, because unfortunately in society, sometimes you have to conform to get by. So I have seen that story time and time again with Rahuvian people, where it becomes about refining who they are. And I don't even know if I want to say refining, but sometimes it's just about blending who they are to make it to seem like they're someone else. But that's not who they are. Also, we want to talk about how this can look like weight loss. This can look like weight gain, change your hair, I think I already talked about accents and all of this jazz. Shatabhisha, learning about who you are, revealing sides of yourself you never even knew about. We talked about how this can definitely represent that you are fighting for your place in the world. You may recognize that there's some systems around you that don't fully support you, don't fully sustain you. And you're like, I don't think this is for me. I've got to be surrounded by something that'll support who I am. And that will make sense for me. And so you might launch your own personal brand. You might do your own thing. Actually, I've seen the personal brand launch for pretty much everyone I've seen with this placement. Like they launched their own website at some point, their own brand, their own idea, and they kind of explore it and put it out there in the world. And that's something that they will look at. Also, this is just like, you don't want to attract outdated systems, but K2 is in your 7th house. So you might attract a lot of traditional people at this time. You might be very busy. You have a lot to do. You're not in this place where you can laze about. You are somebody who's going to be very interactive with people. Who you meet though, you could meet some very critical people at this time because it's in the 7th house. And K2 is a very critical planet. And not that Rahu's not critical too. In fact, they mirror each other. So they're both critical. But yeah, for sure, you can attract some people like that at this time. And the pressure will be applied. But you definitely want to present reinvent yourself. Maybe you want to be some professional problem solver for people when we talk about this placement coming through. Trying to think of anything else I can see. You know, overall, this can just like a revamp of your life. Now, last but not least, Pisces. We're at the end of the mark. Thank goodness, because we've been here 3 hours. And, you know, I did a little too much research, guys. A little too much. Pisces in the 12th house. Okay, so this is happening in your 12th house, Pisces. The house of endings, secrets, self-undoing, behind the scenes, self-conscious, your secret hidden world. So Rahu here is very much like spiritual and exploratory, and you could be connecting to a higher power. It is a Sagittarius, and so I will say it would be better if it was K2 and it was in something like Mula, and then you're really tapping into the other side. But it doesn't matter, because Sagittarius can still learn about the history when it comes to spirituality, when it comes to astrology, when it comes to all things occult. They can know things like the back of their hand. Rahuvian placement is very, very good at research and knowing where things come from. And so you could be investing in those areas as well. This also can represent some things that have been hidden and suppressed internally within you. Things that you can no longer ignore. So if you have some habits that aren't good for you, you make it to the point where you're just like, wow, you know, this kind of habit is expensive and it's not really all that great for me. If you have some sort of addiction, or if you are just overspending, like maybe you're a shopaholic and you're like, ooh, you know, actually, this is not the smartest move for myself. You know, I don't think I should be spending all my money in this direction. There's more useful ways to do that. And it gets to the point where, like, I have too much debt. I've got to change some things, and things need to be revamped and reinvented in this area. Also, you might start looking at some patterns and things when it comes to the areas of dating in your life. Like, you might say, why do I attract these type of people? And you start looking a little bit deeper into who you want to be with, who you are, why you are coming with certain type of energy into your life. Remember, K2 will be in the 6th house, so this is important for you. And that structurally, sometimes this can represent escapism. Maybe reality is too harsh right now. I mean, we've got to be real sometimes. It's not always positive. It's not always great. It's not always a fun time. So Rahu in the 12th house can just mean reality sucks, man. And I just need a moment to escape and be by myself and feel like I have some sort of silver lining and somewhere, and I just kind of go into my fantasy world. Another thing this can represent is like a lot of artistic innovation. Like, you're a very creative person and you feel like you are expanding, and your talents are coming out to shine, and you want to invest more time into that. And this can sometimes even feel like an isolation period. Remember, I said Sagittarius can be very lonely. So it in the 12th house can amplify those feelings of isolation and feeling like I am by myself and I'm alone and there's nobody here and So you could feel a bit like that. So if you get into a bit of a funk in that way, be sure to seek counseling and do not avoid that. You want to put yourself in a positive mindset. Lastly, like I said, you might not lastly, but you might be traveling, you might be going different places and seeing different things. But it generally will be something that is going to, it might have to be due to family, in a way. Sometimes it's work, but generally you want to travel. It's going to probably be more so due to family going on here. Excuse me, guys. The way that you might assert your independence, is you're kind of getting over people's other ideas. Like, you might be tired of people sort of throwing themselves into this loop of, sometimes you get caught in a social media loop, right? And you hear the same ideas or the same rhetoric over and over again. And then this placement is like, you kind of want to pull away from that. And you get a little bit more selective about who you are listening to and kind of relying upon your own ideas and your own thoughts in a way. And you will filter out people who don't come across as interesting or innovative, especially within your private life, your spare time. This 12th house transit, I've noticed, it can be sometimes the things, it's kind of like fourth house, the things that you do within the privacy of your own home in a way, or even just within, you know, your bedroom, whatever the case may be. Also, this can represent resources and giving a lot to charity. This is the house of charity. So Pisces, you might feel just extra generous, wanting to give back, wanting to give more to people, wanting to help, wanting to essentially find a way that you can support your community. And that's something that can come up here when it comes to that type of vibe and energy. You'll look for any way to do so. You can also kind of like look more behind the scenes and see what's going on into like conspiracy theories and shadow governments and, you know, things that are going behind the scenes that you, what is going on? Did I disconnect? That's crazy. Okay. Hopefully I connected, guys, but you're finding things out when it comes to, let me check, because it's making me nervous. You're finding things out when it comes to what's going on in the world, how you connect to people, and but it's more on a subconscious level. So I want to say that it's more so like I'm doing the work internally and then coming out. But if we're talking about actual material things, similar, it can bring about a little bit of restlessness. And you having these very fantastical dreams, but it generally makes it hard for you to sleep. I just want to say that. I don't know what else to say in terms of that. It can make it hard for you to sleep. Trying to think if there's anything I left out here when it comes to the 12th house transit. Your time, your free time, you might feel like it's split, or like you are being pulled in a lot of different directions. There could be that going on. And sometimes this is an increase in anxiety. And you might have a lot of subconscious fears. And then sometimes this can be like you're checked out of work, like you're checked out of those traditional systems. That is going on here. And then lastly, we want to talk about anything that's coming back from 2007, because the 12th house has that karmic pool out of, you know, all of these different houses. You know, a lot of them have it, 5th house, 9th house, but 12th house definitely has one of those karmic pools. And so you might find something, some hidden issue or thing coming up from 2020. Yeah, I'm still here. I'm on the last sign. You might find some things coming up from 2007 that you have to deal with again this time. And that is all I wanted to say in terms of that. I think I covered everything I needed to do with you guys, Pisces. I will say this: you are in explorer mode. You're in explorer mode, and you want to do things different, and you want to explore different places, and you want to get out of your shell a little bit. So the day-to-day reality is kind of boring to you. The mundane's boring. You don't care about it anymore. You want to explore the fantastical. You want to do things people haven't done before. You want to go to the other side, the other world. And sometimes that just looks like traveling. So, but yes, I'm done, guys. I'm finally done. That was, wow, 3 hours. 3 hours. I've got to shorten it next time. But it's going to be a while before I do the next video. So, and the next video is probably not going to be until like maybe Saturn and Neptune conjunct. There's really not a lot of major transits going on from the Vedic perspective here. I mean, I could go and do the little small transits and all of that jazz, but you guys know I want to focus on the big stuff, because as you can see, very, very long, very informative, Maybe I can do a short video, but you know, I love a research. I love some research, guys. We're going to end it here, guys. And thank you all for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the content. Cannot wait to see how the rest of this transit is unfolding for you. Whether that be you deciding to change jobs, you deciding to address any psychological traumas, whatever the case may be. But I'm very happy for you guys. And this can definitely be very revolutionary. And that is all I wanted to say. Yeah, look forward to the next transit video. I believe Saturn and Neptune conjunct in February. I did all the signs, you know. So if you want to see your sign, go back and look at it, and you'll be able to see it. We are finally done. And don't forget to tune in on, I believe, Saturday, guys. I announced the time. Might be Sunday, actually. let me look at my own time. I put it on the post. As it's there. I don't know why I said the 11th, but it is Saturday, and that should be the 10th. I might have to fix and edit that post and re-upload it. But Saturday the 10th, I'll be here for the tarot and live astrology readings. I'm going to re-upload that post and edit it so I don't confuse you guys. But go check out the community tab, and I should be here on Saturday. And I am happy to be live and doing things. Saturday the 10th at 11:15 p.m. I'll be here. You look like Little Kim. I have heard that before. I don't see it, guys. I don't know. But thanks. I thought she was very, very pretty when she was younger. So I wish she hadn't done all that surgery to her face. I understand why she did it. People bullied her to death. Like, it was horrible. So I do think that's really awful. And that's why you shouldn't listen to people who bully you, and don't listen to that feedback. You guys are generally gorgeous the way you are. So go ahead and stick with it. But let me fix the post for you guys, re-upload it, and so that you guys have the information accurate. I don't know why I put the 11th. It is the 10th at 11:15 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I will be here for the astrology, the tarot. Don't forget to come back Thursday for the weekly collective. And it's been nice doing this. And I hope you guys like my little panel here. I'm so excited about it. You know, it took me 2 hours last night to do it, and I didn't think I could do it. I thought it was going to be super complicated. It wasn't complicated at all. Just to be able to flip through them, like, this is so nice. I love this. All right, I'll see you guys tomorrow, and not tomorrow. I'll see you guys on Thursday, and then I'll see you again on Saturday, and I'll see you next time. Bye.